Tonight we step quietly into the dust of ancient Mesopotamia, where broken tablets still hold their breath. In the late 19th century, when excavators and museum scholars began sorting thousands of clay fragments from the ruined libraries and temple archives of Iraq, they found stories older than most written memories of the world. The British Museum still keeps many of these tablets, and generations of researchers, including Samuel Noah Kramer, Thorkild Jacobson, and modern scholars from Oxford and Yale, have helped translate their difficult signs. These are not smooth books. They are damaged clay, burned by fire, cracked by time, and sometimes no larger than a human palm. Yet inside them something remains awake. You are not entering a loud legend tonight. You are entering a room of dim lamps, patient dust, and old questions. The names Enlil and Enki rise from that room like figures seen through smoke. One is Lord of Command, Storm and Rank, and Sacred Order. The other is Lord of Deep Waters, Craft, Cunning, and the strange tenderness that sometimes interrupts power, and between them stands humanity. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. You may also write where you are listening from, and what local time surrounds you now. Perhaps it is midnight in Manila, early evening in London, or some quiet hour in a house where everyone else has already gone still. The story begins with clay. You can almost feel it beneath your fingers. Cool at first, then warming slowly in your hand. The tablet is not beautiful in the way later kings wanted monuments to be beautiful. It is practical, small, uneven, scratched with wedge-shaped marks pressed by a reed stylus. Someone held it thousands of years ago. Someone leaned over damp clay and made signs for the grain, cattle, labour, offerings, rivers, gods, and fear. Records from early Sumer confirm that writing first served administration as much as storytelling. At sites such as Uruk, where archaeologists uncovered early tablets, the first marks counted goods, workers, and temple supplies. It is a humble beginning for memory. Humanity did not first write poetry in a golden hall. Humanity counted jars, fields, rations, and obligations. Very romantic, obviously. Yet from this practical world came the oldest surviving myths of divine tension. The same civilization that tracked barley and beer also imagined gods debating whether humans should live, work, multiply, suffer, or be swept away. That little detail is hard to ignore. Bureaucracy and apocalypse appear almost side by side, which feels uncomfortably familiar. The land itself helps explain the Mu. You stand in the southern plain between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The air is warm and heavy. Date palms lift their fronds above irrigation channels, and the smell of wet mud rises from the banks. Reeds whisper at the edge of marshes. In the distance, temple platforms climb upward from flat land, trying to meet a sky that gives heat, storm, and silence in unequal measure. There is no stone mountain here, no easy fortress of cliffs. There is mud brick, reed matting, river silt, and human effort. Every wall must be made, every canal must be cleared. Every harvest depends on timing, labour, and the moods of water. A civilization built here learns quickly that life is not guaranteed. It must be negotiated. Perhaps that is why the gods of Sumer do not always feel distant. They feel administrative, demanding, hungry, irritated, brilliant, and sometimes strangely human. They assign roles, they hold councils, they send decrees, they receive offerings, they argue over noise, labour, fertility, and destiny. At the centre of this hidden conflict, Enlil and Enki appear not simply as rivals, but as two different answers to one quiet question. What should humanity be? Not what is humanity, but what should humanity be allowed to become? Enlil, in many Mesopotamian traditions, is connected with authority, kingship, and the commanding power of the air. He is not merely angry wind, he is structure itself, in a world afraid of disorder. That matters, without order. Canals fail, fields flood, temples empty, and cities collapse back into mud. Enlil's vision is severe, but severity can look like protection when chaos stands nearby. Enki, also called Ea in later Akkadian tradition, belongs to the deep fresh waters beneath the earth, the hidden source called the abyss. He is associated with wisdom, magic, creation, and skill. His power does not always arrive as thunder, it arrives as advice, invention, dream, and loophole. If Enlil speaks like a decree, Enki often moves like a whisper behind a reed wall. There is the unease. 1. God preserves the system. God keeps bending it. Scholars still debate how much these myths reflect theology, politics, environmental anxiety, or the social experience of early city life. Some researchers at major universities have treated the stories as symbolic memories of labour organisation and ecological pressure. Others emphasise ritual, temple ideology, and the changing relationship between gods and kings. The clay does not give one clean answer, it gives fragments. Fragments are patient. A fringe tidbit drifts here as well, the kind whispered at the edge of respectable discussion. Some modern speculative writers have claimed that Enki and Enlil preserve memories of visitors from the stars, beings mistaken for gods by early humans. Mainstream archaeology does not accept that claim. The tablets belong firmly to human languages, human scribes, and human religious imagination. Still, the persistence of that fringe idea reveals something interesting. People keep sensing, rightly or wrongly, that these stories are about an older power looking down upon humanity with divided intentions. That sensation is not entirely foolish, not because aliens are required, but because the myths themselves create that feeling. The human being in these traditions is watched, measured, assigned, protected, limited, sometimes spared, sometimes nearly erased. The divine world does not look at humanity with one face, it looks through competing eyes. You sit with that thought as the lamp dims. The tablet before you is damaged along one edge, a few signs are missing, a name appears, then breaks away, a command survives, but the reason is lost. This is how ancient history often reaches you, not as a complete answer, but as a half-open door in a wall of earth. Through that opening, you glimpse a council chamber of gods. You hear the hush of divine speech. You sense that humanity has not yet been fully trusted with its own future. Somewhere in that silence, Enlil weighs order against danger. Somewhere deeper, Enki considers mercy, usefulness, and perhaps affection. You do not need to decide yet which god is right. That would be too easy. Instead, you remain in the old city as night settles over the canals. The workers have gone home. The temple ovens cool. A scribe places damp clay on a shelf, unaware that thousands of years from now, strangers will lean close to his marks and wonder what kind of truth survived inside them. The stars appear above the plain, cold and numerous. The river moves in darkness. In the houses of reed and brick, people sleep under a sky filled with powers they cannot see. They do not know they are becoming part of a story much larger than themselves. Perhaps no one ever does. And so the first whisper of the hidden conflict is not a battle cry. It is only a question pressed into clay. Did the gods create humanity to serve a design? Or did humanity become something the design could no longer contain? The clay does not answer. It waits. Your mind drifts toward a time before humans have proper names in the stories. The land is not empty, yet it feels unfinished. Rivers move through the plain with slow brown strength, spreading silt, feeding reeds, making marshes gleam beneath the morning sun. Birds rise in pale flocks from the water. Insects hum in the heat. Wind passes over open mud flats where no city wall yet throws its shadow. The world is alive, but it has not fully become a human world. This is where the old imagination places the gods before mankind settles into its familiar roles. They are not floating in a golden heaven like later painters might prefer. They belong to a working universe, full of tasks, boundaries, offices, and complaints. Fields must be maintained, waters must be managed, sacred places must be assigned, the stars must move correctly, and the seasons must not forget themselves. Even divine beings in Mesopotamian myth can feel the strain of order. That is a strange thought. You step carefully through this older landscape, where divine labour weighs upon creation. The air smells of river clay and crushed reeds. Somewhere, unseen hands clear channels. Somewhere, voices rise in irritation. The universe is not yet peaceful. It is organised, yes, but organisation has a cost. In the ancient poem often called the story of Atrahasis, known from old Babylonian tablets, the lesser gods are described as bearing heavy labour before humanity exists. They dig waterways, maintain the earth, and eventually grow exhausted. Scholars at universities such as Chicago, Oxford, and Yale have long treated this myth as one of the clearest Mesopotamian explanations for why humans were created. Not from pure romance, not from gentle affection, from work. That detail lands softly, but it changes everything. Humanity enters the story as an answer to divine fatigue. People are made so that gods may rest. The old clay does not flatter you too much. It does not say humans are born first as kings of nature. Crowned by innocence, glowing with destiny, it says humans are useful. They are the ones who grind grain, make offerings, build shrines, maintain canals, and keep the sacred economy breathing. A little humbling, really. Yet usefulness is not the same as worthlessness. In the ancient world, service could bind the earthly and divine realms together. A servant might be low in rank, but still necessary to the house. A farmer might bow before the temple, but without the farmer, the temple eats nothing. The myth holds that tension carefully, almost sleepily, as if it knows the joke is older than kings. The gods need humans. They may not wish to admit it, but the mud remembers. Enlil stands near the centre of this early ordering. His presence is broad, commanding, and difficult to soften. In Sumerian religious tradition, he is associated with the great city of Nippur, whose temple became one of the most sacred centres in southern Mesopotamia. Archaeological work at Nippur, much of it connected with American institutions across generations, revealed a long religious history stretching across many periods. The city's importance was not imaginary. It was built into brick, offering, archive, and memory. To approach Enlil's world, you imagine a temple precinct at dawn. The steps are cool under bare feet. Priests move quietly. Smoke from offerings curls upward through still air. A storage room smells of grain, wool, oil, and dust. There is nothing chaotic here. Everything has its place. Vessels are counted, rations are recorded, names are listed, duties are assigned. Enlil's order feels like this. Firm, layered, serried, not especially cuddly. Enki's world feels different. His presence belongs to deep water, clever speech, hidden knowledge, and living craft. The city most closely associated with him is Eridu, remembered in later tradition as one of the oldest cities and sometimes placed at the beginning of kingship itself. Excavations at Eridu revealed long sequences of temple building, with sacred structures rebuilt again and again upon earlier foundations. Mainstream historians debate the exact meaning of these layers, but the physical pattern is powerful. People return to the same sacred ground for centuries. There is something dreamlike about Eridu. You stand near a marshland shrine where the light trembles on water. Fish flicker beneath the surface. Reeds bend with small sounds. The smell is damp, green, and secretive. If Enlil's temple feels like a court of law, Enki's sanctuary feels like a place where someone knows a way around the rules, not necessarily against the rules. Around them, the distinction matters, because the hidden conflict is not yet open hostility. It begins as difference of temperament, and myths are very good at turning temperament into fate. Enlil looks at the world and sees the need for command. Enki looks at the world and sees the need for skillful adaptation. Enlil holds the structure upright. Enki repairs the structure when it becomes too rigid to preserve life. Perhaps every civilization fears both. The ancient records do not give you a neat family drama. They give many stories across languages, cities, and centuries. Names shift, roles overlap. Divine genealogies change depending on the tablet, temple, and tradition. Scholars still discuss how local theology shaped the personalities of these gods, and how political power may have influenced which divine figure rose higher at certain times. A cautious historian does not pretend that every myth fits like a modern novel. Still, the pattern remains. Enlil is often the keeper of decree. Enki is often the keeper of wisdom that complicates decree. When humanity appears between them, it becomes the place where order and mercy test one another. Humans are made to serve, yet humans are also given breath, intelligence, speech, desire, memory, and skill. Once those gifts enter the clay, usefulness begins to turn into unpredictability. That may be the first danger. A tool does not ask why it exists. A human eventually does. There is a quirky old detail tucked inside Mesopotamian creation traditions. Some texts imagine human beings formed from clay mixed with divine substance, sometimes involving the blood or flesh of a slain god. This is not polite modern symbolism. It is earthy, unsettling, and strangely intimate. Humanity is not only mud. Humanity carries something troublesome from the divine world itself. No wonder the gods become nervous. A creature made to work may also remember. A creature made to serve may also dream. A creature made from earth and godly essence may kneel, then look up, then quietly wonder who benefits from the arrangement. In that little upward glance, the future begins to tremble. You feel the old plain darken as evening comes. The rivers do not stop. The reeds keep whispering. The sky turns copper, then violet, then deep blue, somewhere in the unseen council of powers. The question of humanity is being shaped before humanity can answer it. Enlil may imagine people as part of a sacred system, bounded by duty and fear. Enki may imagine them as fragile inventions worth protecting, perhaps because he understands invention too well. Neither position is simple. Order without mercy becomes cruelty. Mercy without order may become collapse. The tablets do not rush to solve this. They let the tension breathe. You walk farther into the half-lit world before history, where the gods are tired, the waters are patient, and the first human purpose is forming like a figure pressed from damp clay. The story is not yet a war. It is a quiet disagreement inside creation itself, and beneath that disagreement something almost tender begins. Humanity is made to relieve the gods, but already humanity is becoming more than relief. A new presence stirs in the clay. It does not know its future. It does not know it will be loved, feared, spared, judged, and nearly lost. It only opens its eyes. For a moment, feels though the air itself has divided. Not violently, not with thunder splitting the heavens. It is quieter than that, and perhaps more unsettling. One current moves high above the plain, dry and commanding, filled with the pressure of law. Another current moves below the earth, cool and hidden, carrying the taste of deep water and old intelligence. You stand between them as the ancient scribes do not always present Enlil and Enki as enemies. in the simple way bedtime villains are arranged for children. That would be too tidy, and ancient religion is rarely tidy. They are brothers in the divine order, or at least close powers within the same great family of gods. They belong to one cosmos, one system, one sacred machine. Yet their instincts pull in different directions. Enlil is height, Enki is depth. That contrast is not just poetry, it helps you feel how Mesopotamian people imagined power moving through the world. Enlil's authority belongs to wind, command, and the invisible force that presses upon human life from above. His decrees are not casual suggestions. When his will enters the world, it can settle like law over cities, kings, fields, and families. Enki's wisdom rises from below, from the sweet underground waters that nourish wells, marshes, and canals. His intelligence does not crush downward, it seeps upward. It finds openings, it understands hidden channels, secret names, careful speech, and the survival value of a well-timed trick. You can almost hear the difference. Enlil speaks in the voice of a sealed tablet. Enki speaks like water behind a wall. In the city of Nippur, Enlil's sacred authority was not a decorative idea. Excavations and textual studies connected with institutions such as the University of Pennsylvania and the Oriental Institute at Chicago have shown how Nippur served as a major religious center for centuries. Kings sought legitimacy there, and offerings moved through its temples. The fact is plain enough. Enlil's cult was deeply tied to recognized authority in southern Mesopotamia. That authority matters because it gives his severity a social body. Enlil is not only a mythic personality, he reflects a world where order must be established, defended, renewed, and feared. The canal must be cleared at the proper season, the boundary stone must be respected, the temple worker must appear, the king must claim the blessing of powers older than himself. A society a mud brick cannot afford too much disorder. Mud brick melts, so when you imagine Enlil, you should not imagine only cruelty. That is too modern, too easy, and honestly a little lazy. Imagine instead the terrifying dignity of structure. Imagine the official who knows famine follows negligence. Imagine the storm that destroys, but also the atmosphere without which breath is impossible. Imagine command as a sacred burden, not merely a pleasure. Enki stands elsewhere, though not outside the system entirely. His cult center at Eridu carries a different atmosphere in the imagination of ancient Mesopotamia. Eridu appears in some traditions as an extraordinarily ancient city, a place linked with beginnings. Its temple sequence, studied by archaeologists across the 20th century, suggests long religious continuity at the site. Beneath the later ruins, older sanctuaries lie like memories stacked in earth. In Enki's world, beginnings do not feel like command alone. They feel like formation, technique, an experiment. Clay must be shaped, breath must be given, language must be arranged, tools must be taught. A created being must not only exist, but function. This is where Enki becomes dangerous in a gentle way. He knows how things are made. Whoever knows how things are made may also know how they can be changed. That thought slips quietly into the story and refuses to leave. Enlil may guard the decree, but Enki understands the mechanism underneath the decree. He is the divine craftsman of loopholes, and in many myths, loopholes are where compassion hides. A fringe tradition, loved by speculative readers, imagines the two gods almost as rival engineers debating a human project. One wants control, the other wants development. Mainstream scholars do not read the tablets as technical records of an actual experiment. Of course, yet as a metaphor it is oddly persistent. The myths really do show humanity as something designed, managed, limited, and occasionally rescued by secret knowledge. That is why the conflict feels so strangely modern. You know what it is like to live inside systems, work schedules, laws, passwords, forms, appointments, quiet expectations, and invisible rules press around daily life. You also know the relief of someone who understands the system well enough to help you survive it. Enlil is the necessity of the structure. Enki is the friend at the side door with a key he absolutely should not have. Very professional behaviour from a god and natural. The open scholarly debate here turns on interpretation. Some historians argue that divine conflict in Mesopotamian literature mirrors tensions among city-states, priestly traditions, and shifting political centres. Others suggest the myths express deeper human anxieties about dependence, labour, and mortality. Researchers in astrology at Oxford, Yale, and other major universities continue to examine how scribes copied, adapted, and reshaped these narratives across centuries. No sitting as a clay fragment explains the entire relationship. Still, you can feel the shape of it. Enlil sees humans as part of a cosmic order that must not overflow its banks. Enki sees humans as vulnerable creatures whose flaws invite guidance rather than immediate destruction. Enlil asks whether humanity will disturb the balance. Enki asks whether balance means anything if fragile life is not allowed to continue. Both questions are uncomfortable. Outside temples, the human world grows slowly more complicated. Villages thicken, fields are panned, storerooms fill and empty. The sound of grinding stones begins before sunrise. Children chase one another near walls of packed mud. Women carry water. Men repair canals. Scribes learn signs by repetition, probably with all the joy of students everywhere being told to practice more carefully. The gods watch, or rather, the stories imagine that they watch. Human life is not neutral to them. Every offering, every field, every city gate touches the divine order. People are not free-floating individuals in the modern sense. They belong to households, temples, rulers, ancestors, and gods. To exist is to be connected, which sounds comforting until you remember that connection can become a net. Enlil values the net. Enki studies the knots. That difference deepens without needing open-voiced violence. The hidden conflict is not a duel with weapons. It is a disagreement about what to do when humanity exceeds its original purpose. Should people remain obedient labourers within sacred boundaries, or should they receive the strange gifts that make them clever, adaptable, and hard to govern? You breathe in the smell of baked brick, sesame oil, and river damp. A night wind moves across the plain. Somewhere, a temple door creaks on its wooden pivot. Somewhere, a priest lifts a lamp before a divine statue whose eyes are made wide with inlaid shell and dark stone. Those eyes do not blink. In such a world, the personalities of gods become more than stories. They become ways of understanding survival. Too much Enlil, and the world freezes beneath command. Too much Enki, and the world slips into cleverness without restraint. Between them, humanity learns to live, bargain, fear, pray, build, and ask too many questions. That last habit is the problem. A quiet human question can be more disruptive than a shouted rebellion. Why do we work? Why do gods hunger? Why does death come? Why does wisdom arrive in fragments? Why does one divine brother impose limits while another seems to teach the path around them? The tablets do not answer directly. They place you in the tension instead. You remain there as the stars sharpen above the black rivers. The high air carries Enlil's invisible pressure. The deep water carries Enki's patient murmuring. One brother holds the future like a sealed decree. The other listens for the softest crack in the seal. And humanity, still young in the story, begins to grow inside that crack. In your ears, the echo changes into the scrape of tools against earth. The sound is slow at first, almost gentle. A reed basket shifts against a shoulder. A wooden hoe bites into mud. Bare feet press into the wet bank of a canal, leaving prints that fill with cloudy water. The sun has not yet climbed high. but the heat is already gathering over the plain, folding itself into the day like a heavy cloth. Work begins before beauty. That is one of the oldest truths in the Mesopotamian imagination. Before the shining temples, before the cylinder seals, before the royal inscriptions, there is labour. Someone cuts reeds, someone carries clay, someone opens channels so the river can feed the field without swallowing it whole. Someone lifts grain sacks into a storehouse and pretends their back does not hurt. The gods in the ancient stories know labour too. In the Atrahasis tradition, the younger gods grow weary from maintaining the world. They dig waterways and bear burdens until their patience collapses. The text imagines divine beings doing the kind of exhausting work that real Mesopotamian communities knew intimately. Scholars from Chicago and Oxford have often noted how closely this myth touches the realities of irrigation societies. Canals were not decorative, they were survival. That fact changes the mood of creation. Humanity does not appear in a garden of leisure. Humanity appears in a workplace. The old myth looks at the endless requirements of agriculture, temple service, and social order, but then turns them into sacred drama. If the gods are tired, then a replacement must be fashioned. If offerings must continue, then hands must grind grain, brew beer, raise animals, and carry food into the temples. Very peaceful, very relaxing, also apparently unpaid. Yet the idea is more complex than a simple complaint about work. In ancient Mesopotamia, labour had a sacred dimension because food moved between earth and heaven through ritual. Humans fed the gods through offerings, and the gods, in return, sustained the world through fertility, kingship, order, and seasonal balance. The arrangement may sound strange to modern ears, but inside that system it made deep emotional sense. You are hungry, the gods are hungry, the city is hungry. Everything depends on circulation. You stand now near a temple storehouse where the smell of barley, wool, oil, and warm clay gathers in the shade. Workers move in measured patterns. A scribe sits nearby, stylus poised, recording rations with small, precise signs. His clay tablet is not a poem, but it belongs to the same world as the myths. It counts what bodies need. It fixes obligation in writing, turns labour into memory. Archaeological records from early Mesopotamian cities show extensive systems for tracking grain, livestock, textiles, and worker rations. Research associated with major universities, including the University of Pennsylvania and Yale, has shown how administration and temple economy shaped early writing. This is one of the mainstream facts that makes the mythology feel less distant. The gods may speak in story, but the tablets count bread. Bread is never abstract. You feel the rough edge of a ration bowl in your hand. It is plain, quickly made, and not meant to impress anyone. Countless similar bowls have been found at sites linked to early urban life. They suggest standardized distribution, organized labor, and the ordinary feeding of many people under institutional control. In other words, civilization learns to count mouths. And once mouths are counted, bodies become part of a system. Here, Enlil's view begins to sharpen. A created humanity is useful because it can carry the burden of order. People become the living machinery of sacred stability. They maintain the canals, fields, workshops, shrines, and offerings that keep the world from sliding back into confusion. In this sense, Enlil does not merely command humans because he enjoys obedience. He commands because the system depends upon obedience. Order requires shoulder. Enki's role also becomes clearer, but in a different light. If humanity is fashioned to work, then this act of fashioning is not neutral. The maker has a relationship to the made. A potter knows the vessel. A carpenter knows the weakness in the beam. A mother knows the breath of the infant, even when the household calls the child another mouth to feed. Creation produces attachment, whether power wants it or not. That may be where Enki's tenderness begins to trouble the divine order. He is not only solving a labour dispute, he's involved in the strange act of making a being capable of pain. Once humanity exists, divine convenience becomes morally complicated. A tool can break without complaint. A human can suffer, remember, and sing about it. That makes management more difficult, which is exactly the sort of thing managers adore. Naturally, the quirky tidbit here is wonderfully earthy. Some Mesopotamian traditions imagine human creation with clay, divine blood, and ritual action. In one version, a god associated with intelligence is sacrificed, and from that mixture humanity comes forth. This is not a clean marble statue coming alive in a sunbeam. It is mud, flesh, blood, chant, and necessity. Ancient creation is messy. It smells like wet clay. The open scholarly debate turns on what this mixture means. Some researchers see it as a way of explaining human mortality and divine intelligence together. Others read it as a mythic justification for social labour, where people exist to maintain temples and relieve the divine realm. Still others emphasise ritual themes, arguing that creation stories echo ceremonies of purification, substitution, and sacred transformation. The clay allows more than one reading. You can hold several at once. Perhaps humans are servants, perhaps humans are kin, perhaps humans are a dangerous blend of lowly material and stolen brightness. Perhaps the myth preserves the unease of every society that depends on workers yet fears their awakening. Around you, the canal bank grows brighter. Men and women bend into their tasks. Children bring water. A supervisor watches the line, farther away. In a temple courtyard, a priest prepares offerings for a god whose statue will be washed, dressed, and fed. The divine household and the human household mirror one another. But the mirror is not equal. One side commands, the other sweats. Still, without the sweating side, the commanding side becomes strangely helpless. This is the quiet irony buried in the story. Humanity may have been created as the solution to divine exhaustion, but every solution creates dependence. Once the gods accept you human offerings, human survival matters. Once temples require fields, farmers matter. Once kings need workers, workers matter. A burden can become leverage. Enlil may sense that danger early. If humans are too few, the work fails. If humans are too many, the noise rises. If humans are too ignorant, they cannot maintain the world. If they are too wise, they may question why the world was arranged this way. Humanity must be capable, but not too capable, numerous, but not overwhelming, obedient, but not lifeless. What a delicate little nightmare. Enki also, however, understands that living things do not remain perfectly within categories. Water escapes, clay cracks, seeds travel, children learn words they were not formally taught. A creature made with divine substance may begin as a labourer, but it carries within itself the possibility of reflection. Reflection becomes memory, memory becomes desire, desire becomes history. You watch a worker straighten for a moment and look across the fields. There is no rebellion in the gesture, only fatigue, heat and thought. Yet the sight feels important. A back made for bending has discovered the horizon. The gods wanted rest. They created a question instead. As dusk approaches, the canal reflects a strip of red sky. The tools are stacked. The day's rations are distributed. Smoke rises from low houses, carrying the scent of bread and onions into the evening air. Somewhere, a child laughs, and the sound travels farther than anyone expects. Perhaps that is where Enlil first hears trouble. Perhaps that is where Enki first hears promise. Humanity was made to carry the burden of the gods' mythos, but burden does not remain silent forever. It gathers breath, Yisas. It learns rhythm. It tells stories beside cooking fires, beneath temple walls, and along the patient rivers that made civilization possible. In those stories, work is never only work. It is the first contract between heaven and clay. Your mind drifts downward, beneath the riverbank, beneath the roots of reeds and palms. There, in the old imagination, lies the hidden freshwater deep. It is not a sea of crashing waves. It is calmer, stranger, and more secretive than the surface world. It waits below the earth like a memory kept inside stone. Wells taste of it, springs reveal it. Marshes breathe because of it, from that depth. Enki's presence rises with the patience of water finding its way through darkness. He is not introduced as a warrior first. He is introduced as intelligence in motion. In Mesopotamian tradition, Enki is associated with wisdom, craft, magic, purification, and the mysterious powers that make civilization possible. His name appears in Sumerian texts, while later Akkadian-speaking scribes often call him Ea. Across these traditions, his character bends toward counsel and cleverness. He is a god who solves problems, but his solutions often unsettle the order that created the problem. That is the delicate part. You enter his realm as if walking through a shrine at Eridu, where the air smells of wet clay, fish, incense, and sun-warmed reeds. The horizon is low. Water glints between green stems. The temple rises from a mound built upon older sacred layers, each one carrying the pressure of hands now gone from the world. Archaeological excavations at Eridu revealed a long sequence of religious buildings, and many scholars have treated the site as central to understanding early southern Mesopotamian sacred memory. The place feels like a beginning that has been rebuilt many times. Enki's design is never merely physical. He does not simply shape a creature and step back to admire the work, like a divine craftsman hoping for applause. The ancient stories often place him near the act of forming humanity, organizing the world, distributing skills, and protecting secrets. His creativity is practical. It makes things function. It turns raw existence into life that can work, speak, learn, and adapt. That last gift is dangerous. To adapt is to refuse stillness. To learn is to become less predictable. A creature that only obeys can be managed by command. A creature that understands can negotiate with command, hide from command, survive command, and sometimes quietly outgrow it. This is where Enki's tenderness becomes almost subversive. You might imagine him not as a rebel shouting against heaven, but as a calm figure standing beside the work table, inspecting the unfinished human form. The clay is damp. The ritual words have been spoken. Breath gathers where there was only shaped earth. The new being trembles between usefulness and mystery. Enki sees the design, but perhaps he also sees the consequence. A living servant is not a tool. A living servant has hunger, fear, tired hands, and eyes that search faces for meaning. In the mythic imagination, Enki seems more willing than Enlil to recognize that unsettling fact. He understands that humans are fragile. He understands that they break. He understands, perhaps, that a being made from clay and divine substance cannot be treated forever as an object without inviting sorrow. There is a mainstream historical fact hiding beneath the mythic glow. Mesopotamian texts preserve many associations between Enki and the arts of civilization, including purification rituals, incantations, building knowledge, and the ordering of earthly abundance. Scholars from Yale, Oxford, and Chicago have studied how these associations reveal a world where technical skill and sacred power were deeply intertwined. Knowledge was not merely useful, it was holy. You feel that holiness in small things. A basket woven tightly enough to carry grain, a seal carved finely enough to mark ownership, a canal angled carefully enough to save a field, a song remembered accurately enough to please a god. None of these is grand alone, but together they become civilization. Enki's gifts are not just dazzling secrets, they are the quiet techniques that keep life from falling apart. Naturally, in civilization then uses those techniques to create paperwork. Humanity never misses a chance. A quirky detail from Sumerian myth makes Enki especially memorable. In one tale, he drinks too much at a divine banquet and gives away sacred powers to the goddess Inanna, who carries them to her city. These powers, often called the organizing principles of culture, include kingship, crafts, music, sexuality, law, and ritual offices. The story is playful, strange, and slightly embarrassing for everyone involved. Even gods apparently should hydrate responsibly, yet beneath the humour lies a serious idea. Civilization is not one thing, it is a bundle of powers, habits, rules, arts, pleasures, and dangers. Whoever controls those powers shapes the future of human beings, Enki possesses them, but he does not always keep them locked away. His world is full of transfer, leakage, accident, generosity, and consequence. That is why Enlil's suspicion begins to make sense. If humans are given only labour, they remain useful. If humans receive craft, ritual, music, sex, law, and kingship, then they become a society. A society does not merely serve, it remembers itself, it builds institutions, it creates identities, it develops ambition. It may still kneel before the gods, but it kneels as a city, not as a pile of mud. And cities have long memories. The open scholarly debate here concerns the meaning of Enki's favour toward humanity. Some historians read him as a symbol of creative intelligence within the divine order, not as a moral hero in the modern sense. Others see his role in flood and creation traditions as evidence of a genuine theological tension between decree and compassion. Still others argue that later scribes sharpened his personality to serve literary drama. The clay keeps its own counsel. Perhaps Enki is merciful. Perhaps he is merely practical. A dead humanity brings no offerings. A destroyed workforce maintains no temples. A silent species sings no hymns. In that sense, compassion and utility may not be opposites. They may move together through the same underground channel. Difficult to separate, like clean water mixing with silt. You sit near that channel in the hush of evening. Frogs call from the reeds. A distant dog barks near a settlement. The smell of fish smoke drifts from low houses, mingling with the sweetness of dates stored in woven baskets. People are learning what it means to live with one another. They argue, trade, marry, bury, joke, cheat, pray, and teach children the names of things. Enki's secret design is there, not in a single dramatic gesture, but in the patient widening of human capacity. A hand learns to shape clay into a bowl. A child learns to press marks into a tablet. A healer murmurs words over water. A builder measures a wall by chord and shadow. Knowledge enters the ordinary day so softly that it almost seems natural. Maybe that is the oldest magic. Not fire from the sky, not thunder in the temple, just that the ability to know a little more than yesterday, and to pass that knowing onward before the body returns to dust. Enlil can command such people, but he cannot easily unmake what they have learned. That is the hidden danger of Enki's gifts. A decree can stop a crowd for a moment. Wisdom can outlive the moment. It hides in tools, stories, songs, recipes, rituals, jokes, and children who were listening when adults thought they were not. Very inconvenient children. The human future begins to change shape in those small transmissions. Humanity remains bound to labour, mortality, and divine expectation, yet something inside the clay has begun to exceed its assignment. Enki does not need to declare a rebellion. He only needs to let knowledge circulate. Water does not argue with stone, passes round it, drop by drop, until stone remembers weakness. In the darkness below the world, the freshwater deep keeps moving. Above it, temples rise, fields widen, and human voices grow more numerous. Somewhere in the high air, order listens. Somewhere in the deep, wisdom smiles without showing all its reasons. And inside the human mind, still young and easily frightened, a quiet lamp is lit. The first thing you notice is not anger, but sound. It comes softly at first, coming from the settlements like breath from a sleeping animal. Mortars strike grain in courtyards, logs bark near doorways, potters turn damp clay, children call to one another beside irrigation channels, traders argue over measures of oil, dates, wool, and fish. A woman laughs beneath a reed awning, and her laughter carries across the baked earth. Then the sound thickens. More houses stand where silence once rested. More cooking fires smoke against the morning air. More animals shuffle through crowded lanes. More workers move toward fields and workshops. The old plain, once wide and wind-brushed, begins to pulse with human noise. It is the sound of survival, ordinary and warm. Yet in the myths, that warmth becomes a problem. Enlil hears it differently. In the Atrahasis story, humanity grows numerous, and the noise of human beings disturbs the great god. The word is often understood as clamour, uproar, or restless disturbance. Scholars from Oxford, Yale, and other major centres of ancient Near Eastern studies have examined this episode as one of the clearest expressions of divine anxiety about human expansion. The myth makes population itself feel dangerous. That's a cold idea. You stand in a crowded settlement at dusk, and the reason becomes easier to feel. A city is never truly quiet. Even in sleep, it creaks, roof beams settle, donkeys shift, infants cry, and the sick cough behind walls of mud brick, grain jars scrape against floors. Somewhere, someone whispers a prayer. Somewhere else, someone lies awake resenting a neighbour with impressive dedication. Human life multiplies sound. To human ears, such noise means community. To Enlil's ear, it becomes violation. The system built to relieve divine labour has developed its own rhythm, and that rhythm no longer fits neatly beneath command. Humanity has not only worked, humanity has spread. It has filled spaces with hunger, birth, conflict, music, smoke, and the stubborn refusal to remain a quiet tool. Noise is life becoming visible. Enlil's fear is not simply that people are loud or bowl. That would make him only irritable, like a celestial landlord tapping the ceiling with a broom. His fear is deeper. Noise suggests overflow. It suggests a population beyond measure, a force pressing against limits, a creation slipping away from its assigned purpose. The more humans multiply, the harder they become to govern, feed, count, restrain, and stillness. Order hears a crowd and imagines collapse. In the Mesopotamian world, this would not be an abstract concern, son. Irrigation agriculture required cooperation, maintenance, and careful distribution. Canals could bring abundance, but they also brought disputes. Fields needed boundaries. Labour needed organisation. Water had to be shared, guided, and controlled. Records from ancient administrative tablets confirm how carefully institutions counted rations, workers, animals, and goods. Counting was not a hobby, it was control made visible. When numbers grow, control must grow with them. That is where Enlil stands, high in the imagined architecture of the cosmos, listening to humanity become too many. The wind around him is dry, the sky is pale. His authority feels like the pressure that comes before a storm, when birds fall silent and even the reeds seem to wait. He is not a god of cosy conversation. He is the force that says a boundary must hold. And yet, what boundary can hold life forever? You hear the city breathe under the stars. The smell of flatbread drifts from ovens, beer ferments in jars, sheep press together in pens, adding their own complaints to the evening chorus. A scribe bends over a tablet by lamplight, marking quantities with tired patience. His hand aches, his eyes sting. Somewhere nearby, a baby begins crying, and nobody in the household looks spiritually refreshed. It is almost funny. It is also exactly the problem. The mythic pattern in Atrahasis shows Enlil attempting to reduce humanity through plague, drought, and famine before the flood takes shape. These episodes are not random bursts of cruelty, they resemble stages of pressure. As if the divine order tries several methods of correction before choosing near total destruction. Scholars continue to debate whether these calamities reflect memories of environmental stress, literary structure, or theological reflection on suffering. The uncertainty remains alive. Perhaps the story remembers real fears. Southern Mesopotamia depended on fragile balances. Too little water meant crop failure. Too much water meant flooding, salinity, and ruined fields. Dense settlements could suffer from disease and shortage. The myth transforms those pressures into divine decisions. Disaster becomes not only weather or illness, but the expression of a god who believes humanity has exceeded its permitted shape. That is unsettling because it makes suffering administrative. A plague is no longer just a tragedy. A drought becomes policy. Hunger becomes a message sent through empty fields. The world of the myth is one where the body reads heaven through thirst, fever, and scarcity. A cracked canal bed might feel like a sentence spoken by powers too high to challenge. Enki, of course, listens differently. He hears the same human noise, but perhaps he hears need inside it. He hears children. Not just numbers, he hears hunger. Not just excess. He hears prayer, not just disturbance. That does not make him soft in a simple way. It makes him attentive. Deep water notices what high wind may overlook. There is a quirky fringe tidbit hidden near this theme. Some modern enthusiasts claim Enlil represents an ancient ruling faction that wanted humans limited, while Enki represents a rival faction that wanted humans educated and preserved. Mainstream scholarship treats that as modern speculation, not historical reconstruction. Yet the appeal of the idea is understandable. The myths themselves do stage a conflict between limitation and protection, severity and intervention. The tablets give the speculation its shadow. They do not confirm it. Inside the story, Enlil's irritation with human noise opens a larger question. What happens when creators resent the vitality of their creations? A field sown with seeds cannot be angry when green shoots appear, unless the sower wanted only the appearance of life, not life itself. Humanity was made to labour, but labouring bodies require families, shelter, food, sleep, medicine, joy, and complaint. Creation expands beyond its first instruction. A worker becomes a household becomes a neighbourhood becomes a city becomes a sound that reaches heaven. Enlil's fear of noise may be the fear of consequence. Humanity is no longer merely answering divine fatigue. Humanity is producing future generations, and every generation adds more unpredictability to the design. You walk through a narrow lane where walls lean inward slightly, holding the day's heat. A lamp burns inside a doorway. Someone pours water into a jar, and the clay gives a hollow note. The air carries the scent of onions, sweat, wool, and river mud. These are not grand heroic smells. They are the smells of people continuing. That continuation is what frightens power. Enlil's position can be understood without making him a cartoon villain. In a world built on order, unchecked increase threatens the whole pattern. Too many demands can break granaries. Too many disputes can fracture communities. Too much noise can become refusal. He may believe that reducing humanity preserves the cosmic house from collapse, but a house preserved by killing its children becomes haunted. That is the moral shadow Enki seems to sense. It is possible that wisdom, for him, means knowing when a rule has become more dangerous than the problem it seeks to solve. It is possible that compassion is not weakness, but a deeper form of maintenance, and to preserve life, one must sometimes disturb the decree. The night grows colder, the settlement quiets, but not completely. It never does. Someone coughs, a donkey stamps, a child murmurs in sleep. Far above, the sky opens in black silence, and the stars seem remote enough to judge without being touched. Enlil listens from that height. The human world below remains restless, warm, flawed, and unbearably alive. Its sound rises like smoke from 1,000 small fires. To one divine brother, it is disorder approaching. To the other, it is a fragile chorus asking not to be extinguished. And in that difference, the conflict deepens. The ground beneath your feet grows harder where many feet have passed. A path becomes a lane. A lane becomes a street. A cluster of houses becomes a quarter, and the quarter leans toward a temple platform rising above the plain. Mud brick walls catch the morning light. Reed roofs darken with smoke. The smell of baked clay, fish, wool, beer, and river water gathers in the warm air, and the city begins to speak without using one voice. This is no longer only a settlement, it is not. At Uruk, one of the great early cities of southern Mesopotamia, archaeologists uncovered evidence for monumental building, mass production, administrative sealing, and early writing. Research from major institutions, including the University of Chicago and the University of Pennsylvania, has helped place Uruk at the center of early urban development. By the late 4th millennium before the Common Era, this city had become something vast for its time, a place where human organization changed scale. That scale matters deeply. A small village can be known by memory. A city requires systems. Strangers meet at gates. Workers move under supervisors. Goods pass through storage rooms. Seals mark containers. Tablets record movement. Temples gather offerings. Officials count what no single person can remember. Humanity does not merely multiply in the city. Humanity becomes structured, layered, and surprisingly difficult to ignore. Very impressive behaviour for mud. You stand near a broad courtyard where labourers carry baskets of clay. Their shoulders shine with sweat. A foreman calls instructions. Somewhere nearby, a potter shapes bowls in quick repeated motions, producing vessel after vessel with practiced hands. The rhythm is almost hypnotic. Clay becomes container. Container becomes ration. Ration becomes labour sustained for one more day. The city feeds itself by measuring itself. This is where the divine conflict enters a new stage. Enlil's concern is no longer simply human sound rising into sacred space. It is human complexity taking visible form. A city can build walls, accumulate grain, organize labour, send goods outward, and preserve commands in writing. A city can endure beyond a single generation. It can remember, it can plan. Planning is a dangerous gift. Enki's influence moves through this new world like water through irrigation channels. Crafts, measurements, writing, music, ritual, brewing, building, and clever speech all make urban life possible. In the myths, such powers belong to the divine ordering of culture. In daily life, they belong to hands, voices, and tools, the sacred and practical touch constantly, as if neither can stand alone for long. A brickmaker presses clay into a mould, a scribe presses signs into clay. One builds walls, the other builds memory. Together, they create a human presence that does not vanish when the body sleeps. The city becomes a kind of extended mind, holding names, debts, offerings, boundaries, and promises. To Enlil, this may look like order, At first it is numbered, supervised, and sacredly arranged, yet to Enki it may look like possibility. Both are correct, which is inconvenient. You move through a market space where voices overlap in the heat. A woman weighs dates, a fisherman shakes water from a net, a brewer checks jars with a seriousness that deserves respect. Bread darkens near an oven, children dodge between adults, already learning the traffic of exchange. Nobody in this scene thinks they are creating world history. They are simply trying not to be cheated over onions. That is how history often enters. Quietly, smelling of lunch. A quirky detail from early Mesopotamian life is the popularity of beer. It was not only a drink for pleasure, though pleasure clearly managed to attend. Beer appeared in rations, offerings, and social life. Images and texts show drinking through straws from large jars, which feels oddly festive for a civilization also busy inventing administration. One can almost admire the balance. Count the grain carefully, then drink it with friends. The city is built from such contradictions. It is sobered and noisy, organized and chaotic, harsh and generous. It gives protection, but demands labor. It preserves memory, but also records obligation. It raises temples toward the gods, while forcing human beings into tighter dependence on one another. Nobody escapes the city unchanged, not even the gods who are imagined to rule it. Enlil's system requires cities, yet cities create pressures that disturb the system. The temple economy channels labor and offerings toward heaven. Kingship seeks divine approval. Walls protect sacred order. But every new institution also concentrates human capacity. It gathers workers, specialists, scribes, traders, and rulers into networks that can act with force. Humanity becomes more useful and more threatening at the same time. That is the old problem dressed in brick. Open scholarly debate continues around how early urbanization unfolded in southern Mesopotamia. Some researchers emphasize environmental conditions, irrigation needs, and agricultural surplus. Others focus on temple institutions, trade networks, social hierarchy, or political competition. Scholars from Stanford, Yale, and Oxford have approached urban origins through archaeology, texts, and comparative theory. The city does not surrender one simple cause. Perhaps that is because the city is not one invention. It is many inventions learning to live too close together. You pause beside a wall where fresh plaster still smells faintly of lime and damp earth. Beyond it, a temple precinct rises. Priests tend divine images inside chambers few ordinary people enter. The god statue is not treated as a symbol only. It is dressed, fed, washed, honoured, and housed. In the ancient mind, divinity lives among humans through ritual presence. The city therefore becomes a meeting place between hunger below and power above. That meeting place is unstable. Humans bring offerings because gods sustain the world. Gods receive offerings because humans maintain the ritual order. The exchange is sacred, but exchange always implies relationship. Relationship invites expectation. Expectation invites disappointment. A hungry city may ask why heaven is silent. A prosperous city may grow bold enough to believe heaven favours it above others. Enlil would notice such boldness. Enki would probably find it interesting. In this rising urban world, the future of humanity becomes more than survival. People begin to shape landscapes deliberately. They redirect water, store abundance, train scribes, build monumental spaces, divide labour, and develop stories about their own place in the cosmos. The original human assignment, as the myths imagine it, widens far beyond carrying divine burdens. Humanity is now making a world within the world. You can feel the danger in that phrase. A world within the world. The sun lowers over the rooftop, turning smoke gold. Workers rebound through narrow streets. A temple singer practices a hymn in a voice soft enough to blend with the evening insects. Somewhere, a tablet is placed on a shelf. its sign still sharp in drying clay. Somewhere else, a child watches and understands that marks can hold speech. That child will remember. The city has taught humanity a new kind of power, not the power of storm or deep water, but the power of accumulation. One brick is small, many bricks become a temple. One worker is tired, many workers move a river. One sign is nothing, many signs become law, account, hymn, and history. Enlil's order has given humanity structure. Enki's wisdom has given humanity technique. Between them, the city rises from mud, and neither brother can fully claim what it becomes. It is obedient in ritual and rebellious in capacity. It bows to heaven while quietly increasing its own strength. It exists because gods required service, but it endures because humans learn to organize desire. Night settles over Uruk like a dark cloth. The walls cool slowly. The canals reflect stars. A late cart creaks near a gate, and its wheel leaves a curved mark in dust. The city does not sleep all at once. It murmurs, dreams, counts, stores, bargains, prays, and waits. From above, it may sound like disturbance. From below, it may sound like life-finding form. The sky above the river seems larger than the land beneath it. You feel this most clearly at night, when the heat withdraws from the mud brick walls and the fields become dark sheets of breathing earth. The stars sharpen slowly. They appear not as decoration, but as witnesses. A river moves through the plain in a wide black curve, carrying moonlight along its surface. Reeds lean and lift again, whispering as if they've heard something too old for speech. Somewhere above that darkness, the gods assemble. Not in a place you could reach by climbing, not in a room built from stone and cedar. The divine council belongs to imagination, ritual, and order. It is a way of picturing the universe as a structure where decisions are weighed, offices are respected, and destinies can be assigned. In Mesopotamian thought, power is rarely solitary. Even great gods move within assemblies, decrees, and relationships. That is quietly important. A lone god may act from mood. A council acts from system. The ancient stories often imagine gods deliberating together, arguing, agreeing, assigning authority, and setting boundaries. This gives the world a bureaucratic sacredness, which sounds unromantic until you remember that bureaucracy is one of humanity's favourite methods for turning mystery into paperwork. Even heaven apparently has meetings. This is in Sumerian and Akkadian literature. Divine assemblies appear in several major myths. The gods gather to decide questions involving kingship, disaster, creation, and punishment. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, and the University of Chicago have studied these scenes as reflections of both religious imagination and social order. The assembly of gods resembles an elevated version of human councils, royal courts, and temple administration. The pattern is familiar because it is human. You stand in the shadow of a temple courtyard and imagine the same structure rising invisibly above you. Below, elders gather at gates, officials consult tablets, priests coordinate offerings, kings seek divine approval. Above, the gods also gather, but with consequences too vast for ordinary bodies to resist. The human world mirrors the divine world, and the divine world reflects human institutions back in grander form. This mirroring makes the conflict more subtle. Enlil does not simply erupt in anger like a storm without cause. His authority is strengthened by the idea of council, decree, and cosmic agreement. He represents not only personal displeasure, but the official will of order when that order chooses severity. If humanity is judged dangerous, the judgment gains weight because it can be framed as decision of the assembled powers. That makes resistance difficult. Enki's position becomes more delicate as well. He cannot always openly defy the assembly without tearing the divine structure apart. His genius lies in preserving the appearance of obedience, while bending the outcome towards survival. He operates in margins, in riddles, in technicalities, in speech addressed to walls, rather than directly to forbidden ears. He does not always break the law, he embarrasses the law with its own wording, a rather elegant nuisance. In the stillness of the ancient city, you can feel why such a figure matters. Ordinary people live under systems they did not design. A worker does not rewrite temple policy. A farmer does not command the flood. A widow does not easily argue with a palace official. Survival often depends on someone who understands hidden procedures, someone who can interpret, mediate, or find a path through a sealed gate. Enki is that path, magnified into divinity. Enlil is the sealed gate. Yet the gate has a purpose in a world of floodplains, trade routes, rival cities, and uncertain harvests. Unbounded freedom may look less like paradise than ruin. Ancient Mesopotamian communities were deeply aware of fragility. Rivers could nourish and destroy. Kings could protect and exploit. Fields could flourish and turn salty. Order was not an aesthetic preference. It was the thin wall between abundance and collapse. The scholarly debate here remains open. Some historians interpret divine councils as literary reflections of political assemblies and royal courts. Others argue they express theological attempts to explain why suffering occurs within an ordered universe. Researchers in Assyriology continue to examine how scribal schools shaped these scenes, preserving older traditions while adapting them for new audiences. The council is both story and structure. It tells you how decisions become sacred. A quirky detail from Mesopotamian myth is that gods can be astonishingly procedural. They consult, complain, swear oaths, assign tasks, and sometimes pray when their own decisions have consequences. During the flood tradition, some gods are later portrayed as frightened by the destruction they helped unleash. So much for perfect executive confidence. The divine boardroom, it seems, has regrets. This does not make the myths silly, it makes them profound. The ancient storytellers understood that power often hides behind process. A terrible decision can appear cleaner when they're made collectively here. Responsibility becomes misty when everyone has agreed. Enlil's severity gains legitimacy through divine order, while Enki's compassion must disguise itself because open dissent would expose the fracture inside heaven. You listen to the imagined council. The sound is not loud, it is a pressure in the air. Like the moment before judgment is spoken, Enlil stands with the authority of height, his will aligned with rank, decree, and sacred discipline. Around him, other powers take their places. Each god bears a domain, a function, a portion of the world, waters, sky, earth, fertility, writing, war, healing, and death all have voices in the ancient imagination. Humanity is small beneath such an arrangement. Small but not irrelevant. That is the unsettling turn. If humans were insignificant, no council would need to discuss them. Their very presence in divine deliberation suggests that something about them matters. Their labour matters. Their offerings matter. Their increase matters. Their noise matters. Their survival matters, even to those who fear it. You are noticed. In many religious traditions, being noticed by heaven is comforting. In these stories, it's also dangerous. Attention can bless, but it can also measure. Attention can protect, but it can also decide that protection has become inconvenient. Humanity stands under a gaze that is divided against itself, and that division becomes the hidden conflict shaping the future. The council above the rivers is not merely a meeting of gods, it is the place where human destiny becomes an administrative question. How many people should live? How loud may they become? How much knowledge should they hold? How close may they come to the powers that made them? These questions do not arrive as philosophy alone, they arrive as policy. Policy can become fate in the human city below. Lamps burn in doorways. A baker scrapes ash from an oven. A guard shifts near a gate and presses his hand against a wooden latch made smooth by use. A child sleeps beside a storage jar, one arm thrown over his face. None of them hears the divine conversation. None of them knows whether the next decree will bring rain, hunger, blessing, or terror. That ignorance is part of the ancient atmosphere. People live under decisions they cannot see. They read signs in storms, dreams, sickness, omens, and the behavior of animals, a malformed birth, an eclipse, a strange flight of birds, or oil patterns on water could become a message. Mesopotamian divination traditions grew into elaborate arts. Preserved on tablets with careful classifications, the universe was not silent, it was difficult to interpret. Enki understands interpretation. Enlil commands outcome. Between those two powers, humanity learns to live with uncertainty. The council may decide, but the meaning of the decision must still pass through water. Dream, omen, priest, and scribe. There is always a gap between decree and understanding. In that gap, Enki can move. In that gap, human hope can hide. The night deepens. The river keeps its slow course, indifferent and sacred at once. Above, the imagined assembly withdraws into darkness. Below, the city continues breathing, unaware that its fate has been weighed in a chamber made of myth, hierarchy, fear, and necessities. You feel the old truth settle gently. Humanity is not outside the system. Humanity is the problem inside it, too useful to erase easily, too restless to trust completely, too fragile to abandon without guilt, too clever to remain only clay. And so the council remained suspended above the rivers, not finished, not silent, not merciful enough, not cruel enough to end the question forever. The rebellion does not begin with weapons. It begins with memory. You feel it in the quiet space between one generation and the next, where a child watches an adult press signs into clay and understands that sound can survive the mouth. You feel it when a worker learns the weak point in an overseer's count. You feel it when a healer remembers which herb cools fever, and when a builder knows how much water must be mixed with clay before a wall will hold through summer. Knowledge settles into human hands. Not all at once, not like a thunderbolt. It gathers slowly, the way dust gathers on a sleeping shelf, almost invisible until one morning everything has changed colour. The first human rebellion is not a shouted refusal against the gods. It is the slow development of capacity, the quiet discovery that survival can be improved by remembering. That is enough to trouble heaven. In the oldest Mesopotamian city worlds, writing expands beyond simple accounting into names, professions, offerings, hymns, myths, and royal claims. Researchers connected with Yale, Oxford, and the University of Chicago have shown how scribal culture transformed early societies by preserving authority and memory. A spoken order disappears unless someone obeys it at once. A written order can wait on a shelf for years, stubborn as a scorpion. A tablet does not forget. This may be one reason human growth becomes dangerous in the mythic imagination. People are not merely multiplying in body, they're multiplying in technique. They learn to store food, build walls, organize labour, read omens, preserve contracts, and teach apprentices. They create specialists, they divide skills, they build institutions capable of surviving individual deaths. Mortality remains, but memory begins to cheat it. Enlil's fear deepens here, because a creature with memory can compare. It can say there was hunger last year, but abundance this year. It can say the old king promised justice, but his son demanded more grain. You can say the god was offered bread and beer, yet the field still failed. Comparison is dangerous because it creates judgment, and judgment is no longer only divine. You walk along a city street in the thin light before sunrise. The walls are still cool. A donkey breathes steam into the morning air. Somewhere, a woman grinds grain with a steady stone rhythm, and each turn is almost a heartbeat. A scribe student sits near a doorway, copying signs until his wrist aches. He mutters under his breath, probably wondering why civilization requires so much homework. Some ancient frustrations are eternal. That boy is not rebelling, yet his training changes the world. He is learning the codes by which property, offerings, names, labour, and power can be preserved. He may one day serve a temple or palace. He may record grain, land, cattle, or law. He may copy a hymn to Enlil, or a story of Enki's cleverness. Through him, divine order becomes human skill. There is the compleist. Enlil needs scribes, workers, priests, rulers, and farmers to keep sacred order functioning. Yet every skill that serves order also strengthens the people who carry it. A farmer who knows water can resist bad planning, a scribe who knows records can expose fraud, a priest who knows ritual can influence kings. A city that knows its own strength may bow less deeply than expected. Humanity's first rebellion is competence. Not dramatic, perhaps, but extremely inconvenient. A quirky fringe tidbit often attached to this theme claims that ancient myths preserve encoded memories of forbidden instruction given to early humans, as if wisdom itself had been smuggled into the species. Mainstream scholarship does not treat these stories as hidden technical manuals, yet the feeling persists because Mesopotamian myths really do imagine knowledge as something controlled, distributed, guarded, and sometimes transferred under questionable circumstances. Wisdom is never neutral. In the story world of Enlil and Enki, knowledge carries risk because it alters the balance between creator and created. A being without knowledge depends entirely on command. A being with knowledge can interpret command, delay it, reshape it, or fulfill it in a way nobody intended. Enki's gifts may help humanity survive, but they also make humanity harder to govern. A clever servant is still a servant. For a while, the open scholarly debate turns on whether these myths should be read mainly as religious narratives, reflections of temple ideology, or symbolic responses to the pressures of early urban life. Some historians focus on the divine hierarchy and ritual meaning. Others see anxieties about population, labour, and social control. Researchers in ancient Near Eastern studies continue to examine how scribal schools preserved older stories while shaping them for new audiences. The debate remains unsettled, as it should. A myth that can be solved too neatly is usually not very old. The deeper stories survive because they hold several truths in one clay body. Humanity serves the gods. Humanity depends on the gods. Humanity fears the gods. Humanity learns from the gods. Humanity also becomes a problem for the gods, because learning is a form of movement. You sense that movement in the marketplace. A merchant measures silver. A potter examines a kiln. A shepherd counts animals under his breath. A singer practices temple hymns with careful breath control. A midwife knows the timing of birth better than any royal decree. Around you, people are not free in a modern sense, but they are not passive either. They carry practical intelligence in their muscles and memories. The city is full of small rebellions disguised as skill. Enlil's imagined anxiety may come from recognizing that human beings are becoming participants in order, not merely recipients of it. They can maintain canals, but also dispute canals. They can feed temples, but also question temple demands. They can worship kings, but also remember bad kings. They can fear divine judgment, but also tell stories in which gods make mistakes. That last one is especially bold. The old myths do not always flatter the divine world. Gods quarrel. regret, panic, deceive, desire, and miscalculate. This is not atheism hidden in clay, and it is something subtler. It is the recognition that power itself can be unstable. When humans preserve stories about divine disagreement, they are also preserving the thought that authority is not always unanimous. Enki becomes the divine opening for that thought. He does not tell humanity to overthrow the heavens. He gives, protects, advises, and complicates. He allows a created species to keep developing beyond simple labor. His rebellion, if it is one, is gentle enough to hide inside all care. Enlil can condemn noise, but he cannot easily condemn every act of healing, building, teaching, and remembering without condemning the very system that depends on them. So the conflict tightens. You stand now near the edge of a field where canal water glimmers under late afternoon sun. The mud is warm between your toes. Dragonflies pass over the water, far away. Temple walls rise above the city, pale against the sky. The world seems peaceful, yet beneath it runs a question older than kings. How much should humans know? And know. Enough to serve, certainly enough to farm, build, pray, and produce offerings. But should they know enough to judge suffering? Enough to outwit disaster? Enough to preserve stories of divine failure? Enough to see that the future might not belong only to those who issued the first decree? This is where humanity's future becomes unsettling. The species made to carry burdens begins carrying memory. The species made to replace divine labor begins shaping its own tools. The species made from clay begins pressing clay into tablets that speak across thousands of years. In that act, humanity touches a strange kind of endurance. Bodies die, signs remain. Night comes again over the city. Lamps burn behind woven screens. A teacher corrects a student's tablet. A tired worker rubs dust from his feet. Somewhere, a storyteller begins speaking near a cooking fire, and children lean closer because the gods in the story are arguing again. That is the rebellion, not refusal, not yet. Only the preservation of a question, passed from mouth to clay, from clay to ruin, from ruin to you. Enlil may fear the swelling noise of humankind, but beneath the noise lies something quieter and harder to destroy. A human being has begun to remember why it was afraid. The silence does not break, it bends. You sense Enki most clearly in that bending where a command remains in place, yet life finds a narrow passage around it. The world above may be filled with decrees, councils, and solemn decisions, but the deep water below moves by another wisdom. It does not shout against stone, it searches, it touches every hidden weakness. It waits until pressure becomes a doorway. This is how Enki intervenes, not always with open defiance, not with banners, armies, or speeches fit for a palace courtyard. His way is quieter, and because it is quieter, it lasts. He enters the story through dreams, riddles, coded speech, rituals, and warnings that seem to obey the surface of a command while changing its effect. Enlil may speak as law, but Enki speaks as interpretation. Interpretation can save a life. In Mesopotamian religion, dreams were not treated merely as private fantasies. They could be messages, warnings, or signs requiring careful attention. Ancient texts preserve dream reports, omens, and rituals meant to respond to frightening visions. Scholars at Yale and Oxford have long studied how divination shaped decision-making in Mesopotamia. Where the unseen world was thought to communicate through symbols, a dream could alter a king's plans. That fact matters here. When the divine world closes its mouth, Enki may open another channel. The sleeping mind becomes a reed boat slipping past guards. The dreamer hears what waking ears cannot receive. A symbol appears, a wall speaks, A river rises in the dark. Someone wakes before dawn with a heart beating too quickly and the taste of warning still on the tongue. You lie in that imagined darkness. The room smells of woven mats, old smoke, and clay jars cooling after the heat of day. Outside, the city has softened into murmurs. A dog turns once and settles. A baby sighs. Somewhere, a lamp goes out. The sleeper does not know that a god of hidden water is near, not as a blaze in form, but as a pressure inside thought. Enki's kindness rarely arrives without joy, without cleverness. That is important, because pure kindness may be easy to crush. Clever kindness survives longer. It disguises itself as damn technical obedience, as ritual instruction, as advice to someone who is not officially the intended listener. It moves sideways. It understands that power often controls direct speech, so truth must sometimes travel through strange routes. A wall may hear, a dream may answer, a craftsman may understand. In the myth of Atrahasis, Enki repeatedly frustrates Enlil's attempts to reduce humanity through disaster. When plague, drought, and famine threaten the people, Enki provides instructions that allow relief. The details vary by tradition and preservation, but the pattern is clear. Enlil pressures humanity, Enki gives guidance. Human survival depends on receiving wisdom before destruction completes its work. The conflict becomes procedural, almost painfully so. Enlil does not need to hate every individual human. He acts through large-scale measures, plague, drought, hunger, the kinds of suffering that turn people into numbers, then numbers into silence. Enki interrupts by restoring the personal scale. He gives someone something to do. Perform this ritual, appeal to this god, change the offerings, seek the cause, act before despair hardens. Action is mercy in practical clothing. You walk through a city touched by famine in the old imagination. The market stalls look emptier. The smell of baking bread is faint. Animals are lean. The canal water sits too low against its banks, exposing cracked mud where reeds once grew thick. People speak in quieter voices, because hunger makes sound expensive. Children watch adults with solemn eyes. This is not spectacle. It is fear with the dust on it. Enki's intervention in such a world does not erase suffering as if nothing happened. It creates a path through suffering. That distinction gives the myth its unsettling maturity. Mercy does not always arrive as rescue from the first wound. Sometimes it arrives as knowledge of how to endure the wound, reduce it, redirect it, or prevent its final victory. The old storytellers understood that a quirky fringe tidbit often attached to Enki's warnings is the idea of hidden instruction preserved by secret priesthoods or initiates, as though certain ancient rituals carried coded survival knowledge from a forgotten age. Mainstream historians are cautious about such claims, and rightly so, yet the Mesopotamian world did contain specialist knowledge guarded by scribes, priests, diviners, and healers. Secrets did exist, though not always the glamorous kind. Sometimes the secret is which herb to boil, sometimes it is which god to appease, sometimes it is where to dig when the water disappears. Enki's domain includes those practical mysteries. He is not merely a soft-hearted patron of humanity, he is the divine intelligence of workable solutions. His sympathy has tools, it has procedures, it has timing. It knows that the difference between life and death may be one instruction remembered at the correct hour. That makes him beloved and dangerous. Open scholarly discussion continues around how Enki's intervention should be understood. Some researchers interpret them as evidence of competing theological traditions, where one divine figure embodies royal authority, while another embodies wisdom and mediation. Others read them as literary devices that sustain tension between catastrophe and survival. Still others connect them to real anxieties about disease, irrigation failure, and food shortage in ancient societies. The tablets hold all these possibilities without choosing for you. Perhaps that is why they still breathe. You return to the image of silence bending. It is a perfect image for Enki because he does not always shatter Enlil's command. He bends the world around it. If a decree forbids warning humans directly, he may speak to a wall. If famine comes through one divine channel, he may redirect worship through another. If humanity is too exposed beneath the open sky, he may teach someone how to build, store, seal, and wait. His compassion is architectural. It makes shelter out of loopholes. Enlil's authority depends on finality. A decree must mean what it says. A boundary must remain a boundary. A punishment must fall with enough force to restore fear. Enki's wisdom depends on the fact that no language is perfectly sealed. Every command has edges. Every wall has pores. Every decision must enter the messy world of clay, water, breath, and human response. There, in the mess, mercy can work. You sit near the river at twilight, listening to water press softly against reeds. The sky is washed with pale gold, Gahor. A fisherman repairs his net with patient fingers. Each knot is small, but each matters. A net fails through one gap at a time. A life may be saved through one knot at a time. Enki would appreciate that. The future of humanity, in his hands, is not secured by grand permission. It is kept alive through repeated interruption. One disaster is delayed. One family is warned. One ritual is taught. One survivor understands the message hidden inside an impossible instruction. Survival becomes a chain of small mercies, each fragile, each almost lost. And Enlil notices, how could he not? The people who should have diminished continue. Ooh, the noise returns, the offerings resume, children are born, smoke rises again from ovens. The city, chastened but not erased, goes back to its ordinary stubbornness. It grinds grain, mends sandals, counts jars, and complains about neighbours with admirable consistency. Life is insolent that way. Yet Enki's interventions also deepen the danger for humanity. Each rescue proves that humans can receive divine knowledge and act on it. They are not merely passive sufferers beneath heaven's punishment. They can respond, adapt, and survive by instruction. This makes them more dependent on Enki, but also more capable in themselves. The helper teaches the help to stand. That is never neutral. Night settles over the water. The reeds darken into a single mass somewhere in the city. A sleeper turns beneath a woolen covering, carrying the faint remains of a dream. The dream is not fully remembered, only a feeling stays, a quiet certainty that danger has spoken, and that someone beneath the world has answered. The silence does not break. It bends again. The decision forms like a cloud over a plain that has forgotten rain. At first there is only pressure. The air grows still. Birds remain low in the reeds. Dogs sleep with their noses tucked beneath their tails. In the fields, workers look at the sky more often than usual, though they cannot say why. The world has not changed yet. But the mood has something invisible has begun arranging itself. This is how catastrophe often enters old stories, not as sudden chaos, but as preparation to be. The flood in Mesopotamian tradition is not merely bad weather. It is presented as a decision, shaped among gods who have grown weary of humanity's unrest. In the Atrahasis epic, the movement towards destruction comes after earlier attempts to reduce human noise through plague, drought, and famine. Scholars from Oxford, Yale, and Chicago have often treated this sequence as one of the most important ancient reflections on divine judgment and human vulnerability. A storm is frightening. A planned storm is worse. You stand in the days before the waters, when nobody yet knows the sky has become a sentence. The city still functions. Bakers knead dough. Fishermen mend nets. Scribes press signs into damp tablets. A woman shakes dust from a woven mat. Children invent games near a wall, because children are extremely loyal to ordinary life, even when the universe is behaving suspiciously. The cows kennels will carry. The temple still receives offerings, yet above the human rhythm, another rhythm gathers. The gods have reached the point where reduction is no longer enough. Enlil's concern has hardened into finality. Humanity has survived too many warnings, grown too numerous, and returned too quickly to its clamorous existence. The problem, in his view, may no longer be corrected by pressure, it must be washed away. Order chooses erasure. That phrase is cold, and it should be easeful. Enlil's logic is not the fury of a wounded animal. It is more terrible because it resembles administration. If humanity destabilizes the cosmic household, then humanity can be removed from it. If noise breaks divine rest, then silence can be restored. If the clay vessel cracks beyond repair, then the vessel may be shattered. Enki hears the danger inside such neatness. The world does not become pure because living voices are silenced. It becomes empty. There is a difference. A clean table after a meal may look peaceful, but a clean earth after destruction is another matter entirely. It is a peace with no breath in it, no bread rising, no child calling from a doorway, no old woman scolding a lazy grandson with excellent accuracy, very orderly, yes, also dead. The mainstream historical fact beneath this myth is that flood stories may have been shaped by real experiences of river flooding in Mesopotamia. Archaeologists have found flood deposits at some ancient sites, though not one single layer across all of southern Mesopotamia that would explain every version of the story. Researchers from institutions such as the University of Pennsylvania and the University of Chicago have treated the flood tradition as a blend of environmental memory, theology, and literary inheritance. The rivers could be generous and merciless. You walk toward the edge of a marsh where water shines between reeds, the ground sucks at your feet, mosquitoes tremble in the fading light, a water bird cries once, then vanishes into the darkening air. Here, the idea of flood does not feel abstract. It waits in every channel, every seasonal rise, every muddy bank that remembers being covered. Water is life. Water is also removal. This double nature belongs naturally to the conflict between Enlil and Enki. Enki's deep water nourishes, purifies, and teaches. Enlil's storm can command the waters into destruction. The same element that sustains fields may be turned against the people who depend on it. That is what makes the flood so mythically powerful. It is not an alien punishment. It is familiar life made overwhelming. The gift becomes the weapon. A quirky tidbit from later Mesopotamian flood traditions is that the gods themselves are not always portrayed as calm during the catastrophe. In some versions, once the flood arrives, certain gods shrink back in fear and hunger. They gather like frightened creatures, regretting what has been unleashed. The image is startling. Divine beings approve destruction, then tremble at the sight of it. Ancient storytellers had nerve. They did not always protect power from embarrassment. This detail matters because it complicates the divine council. The gods may decide collectively, but they do not all feel the consequence equally. Enlil may stand for the severe necessity of judgment, but other gods may experience the flood as horror once theory becomes water. A decree spoken in heaven becomes bodies below. That transition is where confidence begins to crack. Enki sees the crack before the waters rise. The open scholarly debate concerns whether the flood tradition should be read mainly as a mythic explanation for human mortality and suffering, a memory of regional disaster, or a literary meditation on kingship, divine authority, and survival. Yet researchers emphasize parallels with later flood stories across the ancient Near East. Others focus on the specific Mesopotamian social world behind the Celests. The story is too deep for one channel. It keeps overviewing. You feel the pressure of the coming decision in small details. The wind changes direction. Clouds pile low over the horizon. The river smells stronger, thick with mud and plant rot. In the city, people argue about ordinary things, unaware that ordinary argument will soon seem precious. A merchant complains about weights. A child refuses to sleep. A pot cracks near the oven. Tiny troubles continue beneath enormous danger. That is always how it is. No one lives in a myth while it is happening. People live in chores, meals, aches, debts, flirtations, repairs, and rumours. Only later, when disaster has gathered everything into one shape, does someone call it destiny. Before that, it is Tuesday, or harvest time, or the day the neighbour borrowed a tool and failed to return it. The ancient flood decision grows over such ordinary ground. Enlil's finality now presses against Enki's patience. The hidden conflict can no longer remain only a difference of temperament. A limit has been reached. If Enlil's decree succeeds completely, humanity ends as a failed solution to divine fatigue. If Enki intervenes again, he risks exposing the depth of his loyalty to the creatures below. The stakes become absolute, yet the narration of the myth remains strangely calm, as if the tablets themselves cannot afford panic. Clay does not scream. It preserves. It lets the terror arrive through sequence, decision, warning, construction, storm, and aftermath. That slow movement is why the story unsettles the mind. It does not throw destruction at you. It lets you watch destruction being authorized. You stand in the last quiet hours. A priest closes a temple door. A mother stores grain in a jar. A scribe smooths a tablet he may never fire. Reeds bend in the first breath of a darker wind, somewhere below the world. Enki listens to the shape of the decree and considers the narrow path still left open. He cannot stop the sky from gathering, not directly, but perhaps he can save a seed of memory from the waters. Perhaps he can preserve one household, one set of skills, one breathing witness who will carry humanity through the drowning dark. Perhaps the future does not need to be defended loudly. Perhaps it only needs a hidden door, built before the rain begins. The clouds thicken. The rivers wait. And far above the sleeping roofs, the decision has nearly become weather. The warning comes to a wall. Not to a king standing proudly in sunlight. Not to a crowd gathered beneath banners. Not to a warrior, prophet, judge, or priest demanding attention in the marketplace. The warning comes to a wall made of reeds, clay, shadow, and silence. Because sometimes truth must enter the world through something that cannot be accused of listening. You stand inside a dim house near the edge of the waters. The air smells of river damp, old mats, and stored grain. A lamp burns low, its flame wavering whenever the night wind presses through the cracks. Outside, the city has gone soft with sleep. Somewhere, a dog gives one tired bark. Somewhere else, a child coughs, then settles beneath a woven covering. The wall waits. In the Mesopotamian flood tradition, Enki warns the chosen survivor by speaking not directly to the man, but to the wall of his dwelling. In the story of Atrahasis, and in later versions connected with Utnapishtim, this strange method allows Enki to obey the surface of the divine agreement while still passing on the secret. Scholars at Oxford, Yale, and Chicago have often noted the brilliance of this literary moment. Mercy survives through a technicality that is almost funny. It is also terrifying. Enki cannot simply walk into the street and announce that the flood is coming. The decree of the gods has weight, and secrecy has been imposed. If he openly betrays the council, the structure of divine authority may fracture. So he chooses a path that is neither silence nor direct disobedience. He speaks to a thing, and the human being near the thing understands. A wall becomes an ear. This is Enki's genius at its most delicate. His compassion does not tear down the decree. It slips through the grammar of it. He does not warn the man, officially speaking. He addresses the reed wall. The wall, naturally, is a very attentive architectural feature. It keeps secrets beautifully, mostly because it has no face. Still, the message is clear. Tear down the house, build a boat, abandon possessions, preserve life, prepare for waters that will erase the familiar world. You feel the words settle into the room like cold air. The house, once a shelter, becomes raw material. The home that held meals, sleep, arguments, laughter, illness, and memory must be dismantled so something stranger can be made. Survival begins with destruction on a smaller scale. To live, the man must unmake the place where he has lived. That is an old and bitter wisdom. The mainstream historical fact here is that boat building was not an impossible fantasy in southern Mesopotamia. The region had long traditions of reed boats, river transport, bitumen waterproofing, and marshland craft. Archaeological and textual studies from major universities have shown that bitumen, reeds, wood, and rope were essential materials in ancient Mesopotamian construction and trade. The flood vessel belongs to a world that knew water intimately. The story is mythic, but its materials are local. You can smell them now, bitumen, thick and black, sharp in the nostrils, fresh reeds, green and fibrous beneath the hand, rope scraping the palm, wood groaning softly as it is pulled into place. The survivor must become builder, listener, liar, organizer, and keeper of animals. He must answer neighbours who ask why the house is being dismantled. The old texts preserve a sense of explanation. He cannot say everything. He gives words shaped for safety, not honesty. Perhaps he says Enlil has rejected him, and he must leave the city. Perhaps he speaks of blessing elsewhere, or a fate that no longer belongs among his neighbours. Whatever the form, the warning creates isolation. The one who knows must stand apart from those who do not. Knowledge can be lonely. A quirky fringe tidbit often attached to this scene is the claim that the boat instructions preserve advanced engineering from a lost civilization. Mainstream scholars do not need that claim to respect the story. Ancient Mesopotamian people were already capable observers of watercraft, materials, and practical survival. The myth magnifies familiar technologies into a vessel of cosmic preservation, which is impressive enough without adding spaceships. Frankly, reeds are doing plenty of work here. The open scholarly debate concerns the exact relationship between the flood stories of Atrahasis, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and other ancient Near Eastern versions. Some researchers see them as part of a shared Mesopotamian literary tradition, adapted across languages and centuries. Others examine how each version changes the reason for destruction, the character of the survivor, and the behaviour of the gods. The wall remains one of the most haunting details, because the wall tells you what kind of conflict this is. It is not merely Enlil against Enki, it is decree against interpretation, silence against hidden speech, total destruction against one narrow survival plan. The wall stands at the point where law and mercy touch without openly admitting they have touched. It is the architecture of plausible denial. You sit beside that wall in the imagined darkness. The reed bundles are rough against your shoulder. The clay daubing is cool where the night air has touched it. A small beetle moves through a crack. From outside comes the low sound of the river, ordinary and patient, as if it has not been chosen to become the instrument of ending. The survivor listens. He understands enough to be afraid. Perhaps that's what makes him worthy of survival. Not purity, not greatness, not heroic strength, but the ability to hear a hidden warning and act before proof arrives. Anyone can believe in the storm after the roof is gone. The difficult thing is to begin building while the stars are still visible. He must trust the whisper. He must also move quickly. The days become filled with labour. Boards are fitted, reeds are bundled, Seams are sealed with bitumen until hands darken and clothing stinks of tar. Animals must be gathered, grain must be stored, family members must be drawn into the secret, or at least into obedience. Every action looks unreasonable until the first impossible cloud appears. That is the burden of foresight. You can imagine the neighbours watching. Some laugh softly, some pity him, some suspect madness. A few may feel unease and look toward the river with narrowed eyes. Human beings are excellent at recognizing danger a little too late. It is one of our most consistent traditions. The boat rises, not as a sleek vessel of later imagination, but as a desperate container for life. It is less a ship than a sealed womb, a floating storehouse, a dark chamber where breath will wait while the world outside dissolves. It carries seed, memory, animal warmth, human fear, and the secret guilt of a god who could not allow the decree to finish its work. Enki has spoken. Enlil has not yet answered. The warning through the wall reveals the deepest fracture in the divine order. If Enlil's will truly represented absolute justice, no warning would be needed. If Enki's mercy were openly accepted, no trick would be required. The existence of the trick shows that heaven is divided, and humanity survives in the narrow space between official hate and hidden compassion. That space is very small. It is wide enough for a boat. Night gathers around the unfinished vessel. The smell of bitumen clings to everything. The reeds hiss softly in the wind. The wall that heard the secret stands damaged now, partly dismantled, its purpose fulfilled. It has received the forbidden words and given them into human action. A house is becoming an ark. A warning is becoming a future. And somewhere beneath the dark earth, the deep water waits, not as destruction alone, but as the old path by which Enki's mercy moves unseen. The first rain does not seem like the end of the world. It taps softly against reed roofs and darkens the dust in small circles. People turn their faces upward, with the old instinctive hope that comes whenever water arrives from the sky. A farmer smiles for a moment. A child runs into the lane and lifts both hands. Somewhere, a woman pulls a jar beneath the roof edge, catching what she can. Then the rain does not stop. The sound grows thicker, heavier, less like blessing and more like command. Water runs down walls of mud brick and gathers at thresholds. Courtyards become shallow pools. The packed streets soften beneath feet. Animals pull against ropes and refuse to settle. The river rises with a brown and muscular patience, as if it has been waiting for permission. Now the decision has become whether, in the Mesopotamian flood tradition, the catastrophe arrives as a force so great that the known world is overwhelmed. The Atrahasis epic and the flood story preserved in the Epic of Gilgamesh both describe a destruction that terrifies not only human beings, but the gods themselves. Scholars at Oxford, Yale, and the University of Chicago have studied these flood narratives as some of the most influential survival stories from the ancient Near East. The waters rise around memory. You're inside the vessel now, where darkness has weight. The air is thick with animal breath, grain dust, wet rope, fear, and bitumen. The pitch clings to the lungs with a bitter smell. Wood and reed creak as water lifts the structure from the earth. Outside, voices blur into rain. Then the voices fade beneath a greater sound. Water against everything. The vessel moves. It does not sail proudly, because pride belongs to calm harbours and painted prows. This craft is not made for elegance. It is made to endure. It rolls in darkness, sealed against the storm, carrying life through a world that has become unrecognisable. The people inside cannot see the streets disappear. They only feel the upward heave, the shove, the terrible freedom of being separated from land. Survival can feel like exile. Outside, the city loses its edges. Walls soften, roofs collapse, as storage jars crack loose and drift through courtyards. The temple platform, once raised above ordinary life, becomes an island for a little while, and then a shape in rain, then nothing certain at all. Fields vanish beneath the flood. Boundary markers disappear, paths dissolve. The old lines by which humans organise the world are erased in hours. Enlil's silence fills the storm. His decree has found its instrument: human noise, human counting, human ambition, human laughter, human complaint. All are swallowed by the same immense sound. If order wanted quiet, it has chosen a frightening method. The world is not peaceful, it is drowned into uniformity. There is a difference. Enki's mercy remains hidden inside the sealed vessel. It is not visible as rescue yet. It is cramped, afraid, nauseated, and soaked in darkness. This is important because ancient survival is rarely clean. The spared do not float above terror like saints in polished paintings. They tremble inside it. They listen to animals, panic. They ration food. They wait without knowing whether there will be land again. Mercy has mud on its feet. A mainstream historical fact rests beneath this imagery. Southern Mesopotamia's river systems produced real floods, shifting channels, marsh expansion, and sudden environmental pressures. Archaeological flood layers have been found at several sites, though scholars do not identify one single universal flood layer covering all early cities. Research from major institutions has treated the flood myth as a powerful fusion of local water experience, religious meaning, and literary art. The myth remembers water as both tool and judge. A quirky detail from the Gilgamesh flood account is that the gods, after unleashing destruction, are described as frightened and desperate, gathering in distress as the flood rages. The image reverses expectation. Humans are not the only ones overwhelmed. Divine powers themselves seem shaken by what their counselors allowed. It is as if the storm exceeds even the confidence of those who approved it. That's unsettling. The destroyers are not fully comfortable with destruction. This detail opens a quiet scholarly debate. Some historians argue that the god's fear reveals a moral critique inside Mesopotamian tradition, suggesting that divine decisions can be excessive. Others see it as dramatic storytelling meant to heighten the scale of catastrophe. Some examine it as part of a broader theology in which gods depend on human offerings and therefore suffer when humans vanish. The storm leaves no interpretation entirely dry. Inside the vessel, hunger teaches time differently. There is no sunrise that feels certain, no ordinary market bell, no temple routine, no neighbour calling from the lane. There is only dark, motion, dampness, and the repeated labour of keeping life alive. Feed the animals, check the seams, comfort the frightened, count the jars, listen, wait, breathe. Such small verbs remain. They become the grammar of survival. The flood changes humanity's role more deeply than simple punishment could. If people had been made only to serve the gods, then their destruction would end the failed experiment. But the survival of one household turns humanity into something else. It becomes a remnant, a witness, a bearer of memory through judgment. Humanity no longer exists merely because it was made. It exists because it was preserved against a decree. That is a profound shift. Enki's intervention has created a future that was not officially permitted. Every child born from that survival carries the trace of disobedient mercy. Every later city, field, hymn, and loaf of bread rests on the fact that total erasure did not succeed. Human history becomes, in this telling, an afterlife of a forbidden rescue. No wonder Enlil will be angry. Yet the storm itself does not care about arguments. It breaks, lifts, scatters, and covers. The waters carry branches, beams, baskets, bodies of animals, fragments of roof, and pieces of lives that once seemed permanent. A grinding stone sinks. A child's toy vanishes. A temple vessel spins once in muddy foam and disappears. The flood is not dramatic because it is loud. It is dramatic because it reduces everything to floating fragments. The world becomes debris. You listen from within the dark craft as rain beats above. At times, the sound is so constant that it becomes almost sleep-like, a terrible lullaby against the roof. The body, exhausted by fear, begins to drift. Even catastrophe has rhythms. Even terror can become strangely repetitive when it lasts long enough. Perhaps that is the most unsettling part. Human beings can grow used to almost anything, even the end of their world. If the body must survive another hour, the survivor does not spend every moment thinking grand thoughts about destiny. He worries about leaks. He smells the animals. He counts food. He hears someone crying quietly and says nothing, because there are no useful words. The flood takes the old human world beneath the waters, but it cannot drown the hidden instruction already obeyed. A warning became a boat became a chamber of breath. A chamber of breath became the narrow bridge across divine finality. At last the rain weakens, not suddenly, not kindly. It thins, breaks, returns, and thins again. The vessel still moves on dark water, but the rage above begins to loosen. Somewhere beyond the sealed walls, the sky may be remembering distance. Somewhere below, the land lies covered, changed, and silent. Inside, life waits, not triumphant, not safe, not innocent, only alive. The waters withdraw like an exhausted breath. At first, nothing looks like land. There is only a dull expanse beneath a pale sky, broken by floating reeds, torn beams, and the swollen silence of things displaced. Then slowly, shapes begin to return. A ridge, a mound, the upper line of a ruined wall. The dark back of earth merging through mud. The world does not rise cleanly. It appears bruised. You stand with the survivor on ground that still trembles with water. The air smells of rot, silt, wet wood, and the sharp bitterness of pitch baked by the returning sun. Birds circle above, uncertain where to land. The mud grips every step. Nothing feels familiar, even when a known place seems to reappear. A city without its voices is not a city. A field without paths is not a field. A home without memory inside it is only material. The survivor breathes. That breath changes everything. In the flood traditions preserved in Mesopotamian literature, the survival of one man and his household is not received with simple divine relief. Enlil sees that humanity has endured, and his anger rises because the decree has been broken. This scene is crucial to the hidden conflict, because it exposes the deeper question beneath the flood. The issue was never only noise, it was whether humanity had any right to continue once heaven had chosen silence. Enlil sees a living witness. He sees failure. That is harsh, but it fits his role within the mythic order. A decree that can be bypassed becomes weaker. A punishment that leaves survivors becomes negotiable. A divine assembly that decides destruction, then discovers a hidden escape, has been embarrassed before creation itself. Enlil's anger is not merely personal irritation, it is the fury of authority finding a crack in its own wall. And the crack is breathing. You can imagine the moment with uncomfortable stillness. The survivor offers sacrifice. Smoke climbs from the wet earth, thin at first, then darker. The smell of roasting meat and grain rises into the emptied sky. In the ancient story, the gods gather around the offering when drawn by hunger and longing. The image is startling because it reveals dependence. Without humans, the gods have missed the offerings. A destroyed humanity leaves heaven unfair. That is not a small detail. It turns the meaning of survival. Humanity is not only a troublesome crowd that disturb divine rest. Humanity is also the keeper of ritual exchange, the hand that lifts food toward heaven, the voice that names gods, the body that maintains temples. Enlil may resent human noise, but the divine world has discovered the cost of perfect quiet. Perfect quiet does not feed anyone. A mainstream historical fact supports the weight of this scene. Ancient Mesopotamian temple ritual treated the feeding, washing, dressing, and honouring of divine statues as central religious duties. Textual and archaeological studies from major universities have shown that offerings of bread, beer, and meat, oil, and incense formed part of daily temple life. The gods were not abstract ideas only. They were cared for through ritual households. So when the flood removes human service, the cosmic household starves. The old myth dares to show that you stand near the altar, where smoke curls into the damp air, the survivor's hands shake from exhaustion, his clothing smells of boat darkness and old fear. Behind him, animals stir uneasily. Around him, the earth is raw, yet his offering creates a tiny centre of order amid ruin. Fire, food, gesture, prayer. The old relationship between humans and gods begins again in miniatures. Enlil arrives into that fragile circle. His anger falls like cold wind. The surviving man is not supposed to be there. His existence proves Enki has acted through secrecy. The hidden compassion has become visible, and visibility demands response. Enlil must confront not only a survivor, but the truth that another divine power has judged total destruction unacceptable. This is the conflict uncovered, not guessed, not whispered, uncovered. Enki does not deny the seriousness of humanity's excess. That is important. He does not say the world had no problem. He does not pretend human increase, noise, disorder, and imbalance were imaginary. Instead, he challenges the method, punish the guilty. Perhaps limit humanity, perhaps, but do not destroy everything without distinction. Do not drown the innocent with the restless. Do not erase the whole species when other remedies might have held. This is mercy speaking as reason. It is possible that Enki's argument reflects a moral discomfort within the tradition itself. Scholars continue to debate whether this moment represents theological critique, literary tension, or the survival of different local traditions woven into one narrative. Some read Enki as the voice of practical wisdom within divine government. Others see him as a protector whose actions reveal the limits of absolute authority. The debate remains open, and the silence between interpretations is useful. The tablets do not preach simply, they let the gods argue. A quirky fringe reading says this scene preserves an ancient courtroom drama between rival divine factions, one authoritarian and one sympathetic to human development. Mainstream history does not treat that as a literal record, yet the scene certainly feels legal in its emotional shape. A decree has been violated. A survivor stands as evidence. Enki offers a defense. Enlil confronts a future he meant to cancel. The survivor waits between them. What a comfortable position. Imagine standing there, soaked, hungry, traumatized, and suddenly becoming the subject of divine policy review. Your world is drowned. Your boat smells terrible, and now heaven is debating whether your continued breathing is a procedural violation. Ancient myth has a surprisingly sharp sense of cosmic inconvenience, yet the humour fades quickly. The survivor's presence forces Enlil to see humanity in singular form. A crowd can become noise, a population can become a problem, but one person standing in mud, offering smoke with trembling hands, is harder to reduce to disorder. Enki's rescue has restored the human scale. The species is no longer only clamour, it is face, breath, memory, and ritual. That changes judgment. Enlil's anger shows how dangerous survival can be. To survive destruction is to become evidence against the necessity of destruction. If one household can live, then total erasure was not the only answer. If offerings can resume, then silence was not true restoration. If the gods themselves gather hungrily around the sacrifice, then humanity was never merely disposable. The flood has exposed dependence on both sides. Humans depend on divine tolerance. Gods depend on human devotion. Between those dependencies, the future must be renegotiated. Enlil cannot simply ignore the survival. But neither can Enki pretend that nothing has happened. The world after the waters cannot return to the exact shape of the world beneath the noise. Something must change. Limits must be imagined. Mortality, infertility, infant loss, priestly boundaries, and social restraints begin to appear in the tradition as ways of managing human increase without wiping humanity away again. This is not a happy compromise. It is a wounded one. The sun lowers over the mudflats, turning pools of water red. The survivor stands beside the smoke as it thins into the evening air. The gods withdraw from the immediate hunger of the offering into the harder hunger of decision. Enlil has seen the survivor. Enki has revealed the price of compassion. Humanity has crossed the flood, but not into freedom. It has crossed into conditional existence. The future is permitted, but watched. Life continues, but under shadow. The clay species has not defeated heaven. It has only remained, which may be the oldest human victory. Remaining is not small. Around the new fire, breath gathers again. Animals settle. The first night after survival approaches with strange gentleness. Stars appear above a world that has lost almost everything and still contains one flicker of ritual flame. Enlil's anger has not vanished. Enki's mercy has not won completely. The conflict has changed form, becoming quieter, deeper, and perhaps more permanent. Humanity lives. That is the scandal. The new world begins with limits. You feel them before anyone names them. They settle into the air after the smoke of sacrifice has thinned, after the mud begins to dry, after the first human footsteps mark the softened earth. The flood has passed, yet its command remains, not in water now, but in boundaries. The silence of destruction has failed to become permanent, so heaven chooses a quieter method. Humanity may continue, but not without restraint. The old stories suggest that the divine world must find another way to manage human increase. The flood cannot simply repeat forever, because complete destruction has revealed its own failure. Without humans, the gods lose offerings, temples, songs, and the daily gestures that keep sacred relationship alive. Yet unchecked humanity still troubles Enlil's order. A new arrangement must be imagined. This is where the covenant of limits begins. It is not warm in the modern sense. It does not feel like a gentle promise spoken beneath a rainbow. In Mesopotamian tradition, the solution is more severe. Human life continues under conditions. Death remains close. Birth is shadowed by loss. Some people are set apart in roles that reduce reproduction. Fate tightens around the body. The species survives, but its growth is no longer allowed to swell without consequence. A future is granted. A boundary is placed around it. You stand in the damp plain where the first fires of renewed human life begin to burn. The smell is humble and sharp. Wet reeds, smoke, animal hide, and clay beginning to harden in the sun. There are no grand city walls yet in this imagined moment. There is repair, counting, gathering, and the careful sorting of what survived. Every jar matters, every seed matters, every living creature seems larger than it once did. Survival makes ordinary things scarce. A handful of grain becomes a promise. A dry sleeping mat becomes luxury, a pot that did not crack becomes a minor miracle. Though nobody makes an official hymn about the brave little pot, perhaps they should have. Ancient civilization owed many debts to containers that simply did not fail at the worst possible moment. Still, beneath the small relief, the new law presses down. Enlil accepts that humanity will remain, but his acceptance is not surrender. It is governance under altered terms. In the logic of the myth, the problem of human noise is not solved by affection. It is solved through mortality, reduced fertility, social roles, and the inevitability that every generation must pass away. Human beings may multiply, but death will interrupt the multiplication. Mortality becomes cosmic administration. That is a chilling thought. The mainstream historical fact beneath this mythic pattern is that ancient Mesopotamians lived with constant awareness of death, disease, childbirth, danger, and fragile survival. Excavations of graves, medical texts, lamentations, and household rituals all show a world where loss was woven into daily life. Researchers from universities such as Yale, Chicago, and Pennsylvania have studied how Mesopotamian communities cared for the dead, feared restless spirits, and maintained bonds with ancestors. The afterlife was not bright with easy comfort. It was often imagined as a shadowed realm, dusty, dim, and hungry for remembrance. This makes human mortality even more haunting. Death is not simply a natural ending. It is part of the structure that contains humanity. It keeps the living from becoming too numerous, too loud, too enduring. It returns bodies to clay and leaves memory dependent on offerings, names, and descendants. Enki's mercy preserves life, but Enlil's order shapes its edge. You can sense the compromise in the body itself. Breath is given, but breath is temporary. Skill is possible, but hands weaken. Children are born, but not all remain. Cities rise, but floods, wars, and neglect can break them. Even kings, who wrap themselves in divine approval, must eventually enter the earth like everyone else, very rude of mortality, really refusing to respect royal branding. The open scholarly debate here concerns how to read these post-flood restrictions. Some historians see them as mythic explanations for universal human suffering, especially death and infant loss. Others interpret them as reflections of social control, where priestly and household roles shape reproductive life. Some scholars focus on the literary need to prevent another flood by changing the rules of existence. None of these readings cancels the others. The clay carries more than one shadow. A quirky fringe idea sometimes attached to this theme claims that ancient myths preserve memories of deliberate genetic limitation, as if the gods modified humanity to shorten life or restrict power. Mainstream scholarship does not support that claim as history, yet the symbolic force is clear enough. The stories imagine humanity as a designed being whose future can be adjusted by divine decision. That idea alone is unsettling. You look at your own hands. In the story, hands are the proof of both gift and limit. They can build a wall, hold a child, grind grain, carve seals, write hymns, and raise offerings. They can also tremble, bleed, stiffen, and go cold. Humanity's greatness and weakness are not separate. They share the same fingers. Enki may understand this more intimately than Enlil. To mace or protect a fragile creature is to accept sorrow as part of the design. Mercy cannot remove all suffering without remaking the world completely. It can only keep open the possibility that suffering is not the final word. Enki's victory, if it can be called that, is partial. Humans live, but not endlessly. They learn, but not completely. They build, but always on ground that remembers water. Enlil's victory is partial too. He secures limits, but he cannot return the earth to human silence. The songs begin again. Smoke rises again. Children ask questions again. Someone repairs a wall poorly, and someone else complains about it with great sincerity. The world regains its irritating human texture. Order has not destroyed life. Life has not escaped order. The new covenant is uneasy. You walk through a small renewed settlement where people are learning to live beneath that unease. A woman presses seeds into damp soil. A man lifts a beam recovered from debris and tests whether it will hold. A child watches animal tracks in the mud. An elder sits close to the fire, naming those who vanished, because names are a kind of raft for the dead. Memory becomes duty. That duty may be the quiet human answer to divine limitation. If bodies must dead and die, names may remain. If cities may fall, stories may cross ruins. If heaven sets boundaries around life, humanity can press meaning into the space inside them. This does not defeat mortality. It dignifies the struggle beneath it. The tablets themselves are proof. Clay was mortal too. In its way, it could crumble, break, vanish under soil, yet fired by accident, buried by collapse, or preserved in temple archives. It could carry voices across ages that no human body could cross. The very medium of Mesopotamian memory becomes a small rebellion against the limits placed upon flesh. A body returns to dust. A sign may wait. The covenant of limits, therefore, does not end the hidden conflict. It makes the conflict livable. Enlil's order becomes the frame around existence. Enki's wisdom becomes the light moving within the frame. Humanity remains between them, neither free from heaven nor abandoned by it. Every birth repeats the compromise, every funeral confirms it, every written name quietly resists it. Evening settles over the repaired earth. The pools shrink, reeds lift again, the first insects begin their thin music over the damp fields. People gather close to the fire because night still feels too large. Above them, the sky is calm, but calm no longer means trust. Humanity has learned something. The future can be taken away. It can also be returned with conditions, and in that conditional future, fragile as a reed boat and stubborn as a dried tablet, human life begins to move forward under the watch of both brothers, carrying work, wisdom, fear, and the soft burden of remembering. Knowledge returns like a coal carried under ash. It does not blaze at once, it glows quietly, hidden inside tools, names, rituals, and hands that remember what they have been taught. A child sees an elder mix herbs in a bowl, a mason measures a line with cord, a singer repeats a temple phrase until the breath knows its path. A scribe copies an old sign, then copies it again, because civilization is apparently very fond of repetition. The world has been limited, but not emptied. Inside those limits, Enki's gifts continue moving. Wisdom in Mesopotamian imagination is not only abstract thought, it is craft, purification, speech, measurement, healing, incantation, water, and the ability to restore order when ordinary strength fails. Enki stands close to these powers. He is the god who understands mechanisms, whether the mechanism is ritual, a canal, a human body, a divine decree, or a sentence with a hidden opening. That makes knowledge feel like fire. It warms, guides, and protects. It also spreads beyond the hand that first carried it. Once a technique enters human life, it rarely remains where authority placed it. Someone teaches a child, someone copies a tablet, someone remembers the pattern of stars or the taste of a medicinal plant, and the gift travels, and every travelling gift becomes harder to control. Enlil's unease has not vanished. It has simply changed direction. The fear is no longer only that humans will multiply in number. The fear is that they will multiply in understanding. A crowd can be dispersed, a city can be broken, but knowledge, once distributed, survives into fragments and returns through unexpected mouths. It hides in workshops, kitchens, shrines, boats, fields, and songs. A secret can become a habit. A mainstream historical fact gives this idea weight. Mesopotamian scribal schools preserved long lists of signs, words, professions, plants, animals, stones, stars, and ritual formulas. Scholars from Yale, Oxford, and the University of Chicago have studied these lexical tablets as evidence for an astonishing culture of classification. Ancient learning often began by naming the world piece by piece, as if reality could be made safer through careful lists. Lists are not glamorous. They are powerful. You sit in a scribal room where the light falls through a doorway onto packed earth. Students hold small tablets on their palms. The smell is clay, sweat, reed, and dust. A teacher watches with the tired severity of someone who has seen too many crooked signs. One student presses too hard, another forgets a stroke. Somewhere, a future official quietly develops the ability to annoy everyone with records. Still, something sacred is happening. The world is being sorted into memory. Enki's fire burns there, not as flame, but as method. A sign can stand for grain, a god, a city, a number, a sound, or a command. Writing gives human beings the ability to separate speech from the moment of speaking. It lets the absent speak. It lets the dead linger. It lets power travel. But it also lets question survive power. That is why wisdom is forbidden in spirit, even when it is permitted in practice. No one can run a temple without trained minds. No king can rule a complex city without scribes, builders, diviners, healers, and accountants. Yet every trained mind carries a little ember of independence. The more humans learn, the more they participate in the structures that once held them from above. Knowledge makes them useful. Knowledge also makes them difficult. Very inconvenient again. A quirky tidbit from Mesopotamian healing and magic is the mingling of practical remedies with incantations. A healer might use plants, bandages, oils, minerals, water, and spoken formulas together. To a modern listener, this may seem like medicine and magic awkwardly sharing a bench. To ancient Mesopotamians, the body, spirit, gods, demons, and materials belonged to one connected field of action. The remedy was both physical and sacred. You smell crushed juniper, warm oil, and smoke from a small brazier. A sick person lies near a doorway where air moves more freely. The healer murmurs words while applying a mixture to the skin. Is this science? Is there prayer? The ancient world would not rush to separate them. It wants the whole universe involved in recovery, which is honestly ambitious. Enki's wisdom lives in that ambition. He is tied to purification through water, and water in ritual does more than clean visible dirt. It marks transition, removes danger, and returns a person or object to proper relation with the sacred order. This is knowledge as restoration. It does not overthrow the world. It repairs the tears where illness, pollution, fear, or misfortune have entered. Yet repair can be revolutionary. If Enlil's severe order says certain suffering must fall, then any technique that reduces suffering becomes a quiet argument. A healing ritual says the wound may close. A protective charm says danger may be diverted. A canal design says drought may be resisted. A calendar says time may be anticipated. Wisdom teaches humanity to negotiate with vulnerability. The open scholarly debate concerns how to understand Mesopotamian knowledge systems without forcing modern categories upon them. Some researchers emphasize empirical observation in medicine, astronomy, and agriculture. Others stress ritual tradition, divination, and theology. Scholars continue to explore how practical knowledge and sacred interpretation work together, rather than apart. The old tablets do not divide the world in the way modern shelves do. Perhaps that is the lesson. Knowledge can save humans because it allows adaptation. It can endanger humans because adaptation weakens dependence on pure command. Enki gives the arts by which people survive famine, illness, flood, and ignorance, but every survival technique makes Enlil's final authority less final. A decree may descend, yet humans may ask what can be done. That question is the forbidden fire, not rebellion with swords, the quieter thing, what can be done? You walk through workshops where that question is answered in many forms. A metalworker heats copper until it glows, a weaver tightens threads into cloth, a brewer watches foam rise in a jar, a boatman tests a coating of bitumen with his thumb, a diviner studies oil poured on water, watching shapes tremble across the surface. Each craft carries little mastery over uncertainty. Together, they make humanity harder to erase. Enki may not intend a simple liberation. He is still a god, not a modern revolutionary with a pamphlet and poor lighting. His gifts remain tied to temple, ritual, kingship, and cosmic balance. Yet the effect of wisdom cannot be fully contained by intention. It keeps moving. It slips from palace to school, from school to hand, from hand to household, from household to child. The fire travels. Enlil's world needs that fire, but fears its without knowledge. Humans cannot serve well. With too much knowledge, they may ask whether service is their only destiny. The conflict therefore becomes an argument over dosage. Enough wisdom to build, not enough wisdom to challenge, enough skill to maintain the gods, not enough insight to see the gods trembling around the flood offering. But humanity has already seen too much. It has seen that decrees can be bent. It has seen that survival may hide inside instructions. It has seen that gods disagree. It has learned that a wall may hear what heaven forbids. Such knowledge cannot be entirely unlearned. It settles into human culture like smoking cloth, faint but persistent. Night falls over the scribal room. The students leave their tablets to dry. The healer rinses a bowl. The canal worker rests his tools beside a wall. The stars appear one by one, and someone begins naming them. Not casually, but carefully, because names are handles placed upon mystery. You feel the old fire glowing under ash. It is small enough to carry. It is dangerous enough. Is it enough to change everything? Kingship descends like a heavy garment placed upon human shoulders. It is beautiful from a distance. Gold flashes in the sun. Woven borders catch the light. Seals are pressed into clay with images of beasts, heroes, gods, and sacred banquets. A throne stands above the packed floor of a hall, and the man seated there looks larger than ordinary life because everyone has agreed to look upward. But a garment can weigh. You feel that weight in the old cities when human order begins again beneath divine permission. Fields must be measured. Walls must be rebuilt. Canal banks must be strengthened before the next season tests them. Animals must be counted. Workers must be summoned. Grain must move into storehouses. Offerings must return to the temples. And someone must stand between the people and the powers above it. That someone is the king, not simply a ruler in the modern sense. In ancient Mesopotamia, kingship is tangled with heaven, land, labour, war, justice, and ritual duty. The king is not usually a god in the fullest way. Though some rulers claim divine honours, more often he is the chosen servant of the gods, the shepherd of the people, the builder of temples, the defender of boundaries, and the human face of order. Conveniently, he also collects taxes. Very spiritual, of course. A mainstream historical fact gives this scene its backbone. The Sumerian king list, preserved on clay tablets from later scribal tradition, presents kingship as something that descended from heaven and moved from city to city. Scholars from Oxford, Yale, and the University of Chicago have studied this text not as simple history, but as a royal ideology linking human rule to divine authorization. The phrase is powerful because it makes politics look cosmic. Kingship descends from heaven. That idea sounds majestic until you stand beneath it. You walk through a renewed city where rebuilding has become ritual. Bricks dry in rows under the sun, men carry baskets, women prepare food for workers, children gather reeds at the marsh edge, turning labour into a game until adulthood ruins the mood, as it does with impressive consistency. A scribe sits by a shaded wall and records assignments. Above the bustle, a ruler's seal marks the work. Order has returned, but it is organised through hierarchy. This may be the compromise between Enlil and Enki. Humanity lives, but not as a loose, swelling mass beyond control. It lives under kingship, temple, law, record, debt, duty, and ritual obligation. Enlil's need for structure is satisfied because humans are placed within ranks and supervised systems. Enki's desire for continuity is satisfied because human skill, craft, and memory are allowed to flourish. It is It is order accepting breath. The arrangement is not peaceful in a simple way. Kingship can protect, but it can also consume. A king may dig canals, build temples, sponsor festivals, and defend cities from raiders. He may also demand labour, wage war, seize land, and cover ambition in sacred language. The same institution that stabilizes human life can press down upon it until people feel the old divine burden returning through human hands. Enlil's order has found administrators. Enki's wisdom has found builders. Humanity stands between them, raising cities that both shelter and bind. The king claims to serve the gods, but the people serve the king, and through him the gods receive their due. This chain of service creates a visible ladder between clay and heaven. It also creates many opportunities for someone halfway up the ladder to become extremely pleased with himself. Ancient politics remains very human. A quirky tidbit from royal Mesopotamian culture is the repeated boast that kings built or restored temples with magnificent care. In inscriptions, rulers describe carrying bricks, laying foundations, and honouring gods with impressive devotion. Of course, the actual heavy lifting was mostly done by workers, not by the king personally strolling around with a basket all day. Royal humility, like royal furniture, was often decorative. Still, the symbolism mattered. The king as builder is a profound image. He repairs the meeting place between human and divine. He stabilizes the earth after chaos. He channels labour into sacred architecture. When a temple rises again, Enlil's structure becomes visible in elevation, walls, storage rooms, courtyards, and ritual sequence. Yet Enki's craft also lives inside every measurement. Brick mould, drainage channeled, and carved fitting. The brothers are both present. This is what makes kingship so fascinating. It is not merely Enlil's victory over Enki, nor Enki's rescue from Enlil. It is a settlement that uses both powers. Authority comes from above, but practical wisdom must make authority work on earth. A decree may name a king, but canals do not dig themselves out of respect for impressive titles. Water is not easily flattered. You stand near a canal project where the king's men organize workers at dawn. The air smells of wet soil, sweat, and sesame oil rubbed into cracked hands. A foreman shouts numbers. Reed baskets fill and empty. The canal edge is straightened, and water begins to move more cleanly towards the fields. A bad ruler may demand this labour cruelly. A good ruler may understand that without it, hunger waits. The line between necessity and exploitation is thin. Scholars continue to debate how early Mesopotamian kingship developed from temple authority, household power, military leadership, and city competition. Some researchers emphasize the need for coordinated irrigation and defense. Others stress elite control of surplus, trade, and religious legitimacy. Studies from major universities keep refining the picture, because no single explanation holds every city and period and text. Kingship is not one invention, it is a knot. And Enki studies knots. Through kingship, human ambition is permitted, but contained. A ruler may become great, but only by claiming divine favour. A city may expand, but only by presenting itself as beloved by the gods. A law may be enforced, but under the language of justice and order and cosmic duty. Even rebellion must speak in sacred terms, insisting that one king has failed the divine order and another must restore it. Humanity does not escape heaven. It learns to argue inside heaven's vocabulary. That may be Enki's subtle achievement. He does not remove the structure Enlil demands. He allows human intelligence to inhabit it, decorate it, manipulate it, and sometimes soften it. The law court, the temple archive, the royal inscription, the treaty, the lamentation, the hymn, all become spaces where human voices operate within divine frames. The frame remains. The voice grows stronger. In a palace room, a king listens to petitioned ears. A widow complains about land. A merchant protests a broken agreement. A soldier asks for a reward. A priest warns that an omen is unfavourable. A scribe records enough to make everyone nervous. Here, divine order enters human dispute, but human dispute also reshapes what order must mean. Justice becomes a royal obligation, not only a heavenly idea. If the king fails, the gods may withdraw favour. If the city suffers, people may ask whether the ruler has offended heaven. This gives power sacred support, but also sacred vulnerability. A king stands beneath Enlil's authority, yet he requires Enki's wisdom to govern without breaking the people who feed his temples. The throne is not safe, it only looks comfortable. As evening falls, the king's city glows with small fires. Temple singers begin their hymns. Workers wash mud from their legs in canal water. A scribe seals a tablet and places it among others, where human order hardens into archive. Above the roofs, the stars appear as they always do, indifferent and watchful at once. Kingship has descended again, but it has not solved the hidden conflict. It has institutionalized it. Every ruler must balance command and care. Every city must balance labor and life. Every temple must balance divine hunger and human fatigue. Every law must decide whether it protects the weak or merely protects the powerful from hearing them. Enlil's voice speaks through the need for structure. Enki's voice murmurs through the need for wisdom within structure. Humanity survives by living between those voices. The future is not free. It is organized, it is counted, taxed, blessed, recorded, punished, celebrated, and rebuilt. Yet inside that organization, people continue to learn, remember, bargain, love, mourn, and make jokes under their breath when officials pass by, which may be one of the oldest forms of spiritual resilience. The city sleeps beneath kingship's shadow. The temples stand, the canals move, and somewhere within the ordered dark the human story continues, permitted by heaven, managed by power, and quietly more alive than any decree expected. The old conflict does not vanish when names change. It slips into later stories like river water moving beneath new soil. One age forgets the exact shape of a god, while keeping the feeling that heaven has more than one intention toward humanity. One tradition loses Enki's deep water name, yet preserves the figure of the hidden helper, Hopu. Another no longer speaks of Enlil's counsel in the same way, but still imagines a high authority disturbed by human pride, noise, or disobedience. Myths travel quietly. They do not always carry passports. You walk now beyond the earliest cities into a wider ancient world, where scribes copy old tales. Kingdoms rise and fall, languages shift, and clay tablets pass through schools, libraries, temples, and royal collections. A story told in one city can be reshaped in another. A divine role can be softened, sharpened, replaced, or divided among several figures. Yet the old question keeps returning. Should humanity be restrained or preserved? In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the flood survivor Utnapishtim tells the king of Uruk how the gods sent the deluge and how Ea, the later Akkadian name for Enki, warned him through a wall. This is a mainstream literary fact known from tablets discovered in the library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh and studied by scholars at Oxford, Yale, and the University of Chicago. The story had already travelled far from its earlier roots, but Enki's hidden mercy still breathed inside it. That survival is remarkable. A tale can outlive the city that first shaped it. It can cross languages, empires, and scribal classrooms. It can be copied by hands that do not fully believe it as earlier hands did, yet still find it worth preserving. This is how myth becomes a long echo. It returns from walls, tablets, ruins, and later books with slightly altered tones. You hear the echo in other flood traditions as well. Across the ancient Near East, stories of divine judgment, human survival, boats, chosen families, birds, offerings, and renewed worlds appear in different forms. Scholars continue to debate the relationships among these traditions, especially how Mesopotamian flood stories influenced later narratives. Some researchers emphasize direct literary inheritance. Others speak more cautiously of shared motifs and cultural contact across scribal worlds. The debate remains open, and the echo remains strong. It is not the same story everywhere. It is the same wound, remembered and differently. In later traditions, the conflict often becomes more morally sharpened. A single deity may hold both judgment and mercy. Instead of dividing them between Enlil and Enki, the divine will may punish and preserve at once. The hidden tension that once appeared as a disagreement between brothers becomes an internal tension inside one sacred authority. This shift changes the drama, but not the human feeling beneath it. Heaven still judges, heaven still saves. Humanity still stands in the uncomfortable middle, holding a hammer, a loaf, a prayer, and absolutely no clear instructions for behaving wisely forever. Naturally, we handle that with mixed results. The sensory world changes as stories move. You leave the marshy edges of Sumer and pass through Assyrian halls where carved reliefs show kings hunting lions and soldiers crossing rivers. You enter scribal rooms in Babylon where tablets are stacked like sleeping animals. You pass westward towards the lands of stone hills, olive trees, incense smoke, and scrolls instead of clay. The materials change, but the fear remains recognizable. Power above, life below, judgment near, mercy hidden. A quirky fringe tidbit appears in modern comparisons of these myths. Some writers claim that every ancient flood tale descends from a single prehistoric disaster remembered worldwide. Mainstream scholars are more cautious. Flooding is common in river civilizations, and stories can spread through contact, imitation, and shared human anxiety. Yet the fringe fascination says something real about listeners. People sense that flood myths are not merely about water, they are about vulnerability before forces too large to bargain with. That feeling is ancient. You can find related tensions in stories where humans gain knowledge and then face limits. In several traditions, divine beings or sacred powers restrict access to immortality, wisdom, or heavenly fire. The details differ greatly, and careless comparison flattens them too much. Still, the pattern is tempting. Human beings receive some gift that makes them more than beasts, then discover that the gift has awakened fear among powers above, knowledge that comes with a locked gate nearby. In Mesopotamian myth, Enki often stands near the gift itself. In other traditions, the giver may be a trickster, a serpent, a rebel, or a culture hero. Sometimes the helper is praised, sometimes condemned, sometimes both. The figure who brings knowledge is rarely simple, because knowledge itself is rarely simple. It can heal a wound or open one. Fire cooks bread, fire burns the house. Enlil's echo appears wherever order fears excess. When humans build too high, speak too proudly, multiply too freely, or seek too much, A divine limit descends. The form may be confusion, an exile, a mortality, drought, curse, or loss. The logic feels familiar. Humanity is allowed to live, but not to become unlimited. There must be a boundary between clay and heaven. Enki's echo appears wherever a hidden path remains. A warning comes in a dream. A righteous survivor is spared. A wise figure interprets signs. A craft is taught. A secret name is revealed. A small remnant carries life across catastrophe. The helper does not always defeat judgment, but prevents judgment from becoming absolute. That difference matters. Absolute judgment ends the saying. Hidden mercy lets the story continue. You sit now in an imagined library, surrounded by the dry smell of clay, leather, dust, and cedar shelving. On one side lies a tablet in wedge-shaped signs. On another, a scroll curls slightly at the edge. Farther away, a later manuscript preserves a tale reshaped by another faith, another language, another wound. Each object claims its own authority, yet all of them seem to ask why human beings survive disasters they do not fully understand. Perhaps this is why the conflict between Enlil and Enki feels larger than one mythology. It gives form to a contradiction human beings still recognize. We need order, but fear being crushed by it. We need knowledge, but fear what knowledge unlocks. We want protection, but resent control. We want freedom, but to tremble when freedom removes every boundary. The brothers become inner weather. Enlil is the part of civilization that says the wall must hold, the law must stand, the crowd must quiet, and the river must be contained. Enki is the part that says a wall without a door becomes a prison, and a law without compassion becomes another kind of flood. The ancient gods become names for tensions that never quite leave human societies. This is why echoes survive. Not because every later story copies every earlier tablet, not because one secret master code lies beneath all myth, waiting for someone with dramatic music to reveal it. The echoes survive because the problem is real. Humanity lives between structure and tenderness, punishment and rescue, limit and imagination. Every generation discovers this as if it were new, which is very human and slightly embarrassing. Outside the library, evening settles over another city. Not Sumer, not Akkad, not Babylon alone, but every city that has ever raised walls against uncertainty. Lamps appear in windows. A bell sounds somewhere far away. The smell of bread moves through a street. Someone studies an old text by fading light and feels, without knowing why, that the argument inside it is not finished. Names change, the conflict remains, and beneath the changed name, the hidden river of the story continues to move, carrying fragments of Enlil's order, Enki's mercy, and the long unsettled future of humanity. What did the brothers want? The question sounds simple until you stand beneath it for a while. Then it becomes less like a question and more like a doorway into a room with no lamp. Enlil and Enki are not easy figures, because the ancient stories do not flatten them into clean moral shapes. One does not wear darkness only, the other does not carry light without shadow. You are asked to judge them, and the clay refuses to help. Enlil wants order. That much feels clear. He wants a world where boundaries hold, where divine ranks matter, where humans know their place, and where life does not swell beyond the frame that gives it meaning. His severity can frighten you, because it moves toward punishment when disorder grows. Yet without some form of order, the ancient world becomes vulnerable to famine, violence, flood, failed harvests, and broken ritual. Order can save. Order can also suffocate. This double truth is why Enlil cannot be dismissed as merely cruel. In Sumerian religion, his connection with Nippur, kingship, and sacred authority gave him immense dignity. Archaeological and textual studies from institutions such as the University of Pennsylvania, Yale, and Chicago have shown how central temple cities were to organizing labor, offerings, and political legitimacy. A god of command belonged naturally to a civilization that survived by coordination. The canal does not care about personal freedom. It must be maintained. A boundary stone must be respected. A storehouse must be counted. A harvest must be protected. A temple must receive offerings at the proper time. The city cannot run on vague kindness alone, however pleasant that would sound in a very optimistic poem. Enlil's world says that structure is not optional, it is the skeleton of survival. Yet skeletons are not enough to make a person. Enki wants continuity, intelligence, and perhaps compassion. His gifts allow humans to endure the pressures that Enlil's order cannot gently manage. He teaches through craft, dream, water, ritual, and clever interpretation. He protects life by finding the hidden passage inside a sealed command. He does not always overthrow authority. He redirects it when it becomes too rigid to preserve what it claims to govern. Mercy can save. Mercy can also disturb. That is the part listeners sometimes miss. Enki's generosity is not harmless. By giving knowledge and protection, he makes humanity stronger, more capable, and harder to restrain. A human who survives divine pressure may become grateful, but also less innocent. A human who learns the gods can disagree may never again hear a decree in quite the same way. Enki preserves humanity, but preservation changes the preserved. A saved creature remembers who tried to drown it. That memory is dangerous. You stand in an imagined courtyard at dusk, where both divine visions touch the same human scene. A mason repairs a wall under orders from the temple. That is Enlil's world. The mason uses measured cord, seasoned judgment, and water mixed carefully into clay. That is Enki's world. Nearby, a woman brings bread for workers. A child asks why the wall must be so high, and an elder tells him to stop asking questions near officials. Very wise elder. Very human child. The mainstream historical fact here is that Mesopotamian civilization was built through a combination of authority and expertise. Temples, palaces, scribal schools, canal works, craft production, and legal institutions all depended on hierarchy and skill together. Researchers at Oxford, Yale, and other major centres have long studied this interdependence. It was not enough to command labour. Someone had to know how to make labour effective. That makes the brothers inseparable. Enlil without Enki becomes a decree with no working method. Enki without Enlil becomes ingenuity with no stable frame. One gives the command to build, the other knows the properties of clay, water, reed, timber, and human patience. One fears overflow, the other knows that a channel must let water move, or the bank will break. Perhaps the conflict is not meant to end. Perhaps it is the engine. In ancient myth, many divine tensions do not resolve into permanent victory. They become patterns through which the world continues. Storm and water, law and wisdom, command and adaptation, punishment and rescue. All move together uneasily. Humanity lives because neither force fully cancels the other. If Enlil had absolute victory, silence might cover the plain. If Enki had absolute freedom, order might dissolve into uncontrolled cleverness. Neither outcome feels safe. The open scholarly debate concerns whether Enlil and Enki should be understood primarily as theological personalities, political symbols, literary functions, or reflections of environmental experience. Some historians emphasize their roots in city cults and ritual roles. Others examine how scribes used them to explore authority, intelligence, and human vulnerability. The strongest readings often admit that these meanings overlap. Ancient gods are rarely only one thing. They gather layers. A quirky fringe view imagines Enlil and Enki as leaders of rival ancient factions, with humanity as the disputed project. Mainstream scholarship treats that as modern myth-making, not evidence. Still, The image remains popular because it dramatizes something the texts genuinely contain. Human beings appear as creatures whose future is contested by powers with different priorities. That is the emotional truth beneath the speculation. You are the disputed project. Not you alone, of course, sitting comfortably in the dark with perhaps a blanket, tea, or a phone glowing far too late, but you as part of humanity, as one more descendant of the clay creature that ancient storytellers imagined between command and mercy. You inherit the old tension whenever you live under rules and search for wisdom inside them. The brothers are outside you. They are also inside your world. Enlil appears in every necessary law, every levee, every building code, every calendar, every art lesson that says desire cannot be allowed to flood everything. He appears when a parent sets a boundary, when a city plans for disaster, when a community sacrifices comfort for long-term survival. This is not glamorous, but it matters. Enki appears in every humane exception, every teacher who explains the hidden path, every healer who refuses to accept suffering as final, every craftsman who finds a better method, every friend who knows whom to call when the system becomes impossible. He appears in the loophole that saves rather than cheats. A loophole can be holy. That may sound slightly suspicious, but ancient stories understood it well. Law without interpretation becomes stone, interpretation without law becomes mist. Human life needs both firmness and mercy, both boundary and passage. The real danger comes when either power forgets the other. Enlil forgets the face inside the crowd. Enki risks forgetting the need for walls around the flood. You watch the ancient city under evening light, and suddenly the conflict feels less like a quarrel in heaven and more like a meditation on civilization itself. Every city asks how much freedom can be allowed before order breaks. Every ruler asks how much control can be imposed before people become less than human. Every family, school, temple, and court lies somewhere between those questions. Nobody escapes the brother. The tablets do not tell you whom to love completely. They do not invite simple loyalty. Enlil is frightening, but his fear is not without logic. Enki is merciful, but his mercy carries consequences. Humanity survives because compassion interrupts judgment, yet humanity continues because order shapes the space where survival can grow. That is the unsettling balance. You may want Enki to win because he feels closer to the breath in your chest. He hears the individual cry, the hidden dream, the small household trembling before disaster. But you may also know that a world of only clever escape cannot feed cities forever. Someone must repair the canal, someone must count the grain, someone must hold the line when the waters rise. You may fear Enlil because his solutions can become terrible, yet you may also depend on forms of order that come from his shadow. Roads, laws, boundaries, schedules, walls, warnings, duties, and promises all carry a trace of his stern necessity. The problem is not order itself. The problem is order that forgets why life deserves protection. The same is true of wisdom. Wisdom that forgets responsibility becomes manipulation. Mercy that ignores consequence may endanger what it tries to save. Enki's deep water must still move through channels, or it becomes swamp, flood, and hidden danger. Even compassion needs form. The night grows quiet around these thoughts. Temple lamps glow like low stars. The river moves beyond the walls. Somewhere, a scribe finishes a line and lifts his reed stylus from clay. He does not know he has preserved a question that will outlive his city. He only knows the tablet must dry correctly, and perhaps that his teacher will complain if it does not. The brothers remain. One in the height of command, one in the depth of wisdom. Between them, humanity stands neither innocent nor condemned, neither fully free nor merely enslaved. It is watched, shaped, protected, limited, and forever unsettled. What did the brothers want? Perhaps Enlil wanted a future that would not destroy order. Perhaps Enki wanted an order that would not destroy the future. And perhaps humanity is the fragile place where both desires still meet. The future remains unfinished, and that may be its oldest truth. You stand at the edge of the ancient plain as morning gathers slowly over the rivers. The light is pale at first, touching the reeds, the canal banks, the temple roofs, and the low houses where people begin another day beneath powers they cannot fully understand. Smoke rises in thin lines from cooking fires. A dog shakes dust from its coat. Somewhere, a child wakes before anyone else and listens to the city breathing. Humanity continues. That continuation is not simple victory. It is not the grand triumph of clay over heaven, nor the perfect mercy of one god defeating another. The old stories leave you with something quieter, more troubling, and more useful. Human beings survive inside a tension that never fully closes. They are permitted to live, but they are watched. They are given knowledge, but not immortality. They build cities, but always beside rivers that remember how to rise. The future is a conditional gift. In Mesopotamian thought, human life remains deeply bound to divine order. Temple service, kingship, mortality, and ritual duty, archaeological records, royal inscriptions, temple texts, and literary tablets studied by scholars at Yale, Oxford, Chicago, and Pennsylvania show a civilization that imagined no clean separation between society and the sacred. To work, build, pray, rule, heal, write, and bury the dead was to live within a cosmic arrangement. The arrangement was never entirely comfortable. A person could honor the gods and still fear them. A city could build a temple and still fall. A king could claim divine favor and still die like a shepherd in the dust. A scribe could preserve ancient wisdom and still leave blanks where the tablet had broken. Every act of order carried fragility inside it, like a clay jar carried carefully across a crowded courtyard. The jar may hold, it may not. You walk through a city after sunrise, and the conflict lives everywhere. At the canal, workers clear silt so water may reach the fields. That is Enlil's order made practical nearby. An old man teaches a younger worker where the bank tends to weaken after heavy rain. That is Enki's wisdom moving through memory. In the temple, offerings are prepared with formal care. In the household, a mother saves a little extra grain because formal systems sometimes fail ordinary people. Both truths are necessary. The hidden conflict has become human life itself. Every civilization asks how much freedom can be trusted. Every household asks how much protection becomes control. Every school, court, palace ship, and temple must decide whether rules serve living beings or living beings serve rules. Ancient Mesopotamia placed this tension among gods because gods gave the tension dignity and danger. You recognize it? Anyway. You recognize Enlil in the hard structure of the day. Schedules, laws, borders, obligations, storage lists, warnings, contracts, and consequences all carry his shadow. Without them, the world becomes unstable, the road breaks, the canal clogs, the harvest is lost. The promise means nothing. The strong devour the weak and call it freedom, which is a very old trick with new clothing. You recognize Enki in the soft intelligence that keeps life humane. Advice, healing, craft, interpretation, patience, exceptions, forgiveness, and the secret kindness of someone who knows the way through a difficult system. Without them, order becomes cold. The law forgets the face, the wall has no door. The decree descends, and nobody asks whether breath should be spared. That is the ancient warning. A world with only Enlil becomes a sealed room. A world with only Enki becomes water without banks. Humanity survives in the difficult middle, where banks must hold and water must move. The old myths do not tell you that balance is easy. They show you flood, hunger, noise, warning, kingship, labour, memory, and fear. They show gods who need humans, humans who fear gods, and a future that must be negotiated again and again. A mainstream historical fact deepens this mood. Mesopotamian scribal tradition lasted for millennia, with texts copied, adapted, and studied across changing kingdoms and languages. The survival of myths about Enlil, Enki, Atrahasis, and the flood depends on generations of scribes who preserved old stories inside new worlds. Their work reminds you that human memory is not passive. It is chosen, taught, repeated, and repaired. Memory itself becomes a vessel. A quirky fringe tidbit lingers at the edge of the story, as it often does. Modern speculators sometimes imagine the conflict as evidence of hidden ancient masters guiding humanity from behind the curtain of time. Mainstream archaeology does not support that claim, yet the emotional pull of the idea reveals something worth noticing. People still feel that human history contains unseen struggles over our direction, our limits, and our dangerous brilliance. Perhaps myths are because it gives that feeling a shape. The open scholarly debate continues around how much these stories express theology, political ideology, environmental memory, social anxiety, or literary art. Some researchers emphasize the real pressures of irrigation, urbanization, and labor. Others focus on temple ritual, scribal creativity, or divine hierarchy. The strongest answer may be that ancient stories do not divide life into tidy shelves. They carry many meanings at once, like a river carrying silt, reeds, fish, and broken sunlight. You stand beside that river now. It moves quietly, not as flood, not as drought, but as presence. A woman fills a jar and lifts it to her hip. A boy watches a reed boat slide along the bank. A priest crosses a courtyard with a bowl of water. A scribe smooths clay within his thumb before writing. Each gesture is small, yet together they answer destruction without making a speech. Humanity continues by doing the next necessary thing. That may be why the conflict never receives a hard conclusion. A final answer would betray the story. Enlil and Enki are not problems to be solved once, then placed neatly into a drawer. They are pressures within existence. One presses for structure, one opens a way for life, one fears excess, one fears extinction, one guards the boundary, one listens at the wall, and you, human listener, inherit both. You live with laws and loopholes, duties and dreams, limits and imagination. You carry a body that will not last forever, yet inside that body you may hold memories older than cities. You can obey and question, build, repair, forgive, warn, and begin again. That is not a small inheritance. It is heavy, but it is also luminous. The ancient plain grows brighter. The temple walls shine with morning heat. The river smells of mud and green life. In the distance, someone begins a hymn. Its words are lost to you, but its movement is clear. It rises, pauses, returns, and rises again, like breath after fear. Perhaps this is the future Enki protected. Perhaps this is the future Enlil feared. Perhaps both brothers saw something true, and neither saw the whole. Humanity is dangerous because it remembers, learns, multiplies, and dreams beyond its assignment. Humanity is precious for the very same reasons. The clay creature is never only obedient and never fully wise. It is unfinished. The story leaves you there, in that unfinished place, beneath a sky where judgment and mercy still seem to share the same balance. And perhaps the story is not yet complete. The night around you softens now. Even if the ancient sun has risen in the tale, you may let the rivers grow quieter in your mind. Let the temples recede into a warm haze. Let the clay tablets rest again on their shelves, their broken edges no longer asking to be solved tonight. The old gods have spoken enough for one evening, and even their arguments can fade into something gentler. You do not need to decide the fate of humanity before sleep. You do not need to choose between order and mercy between the high wind and the hidden water. For now, you only breathe. The room around you is safe, the shadows are ordinary, the sounds near you belong to your own time, your own walls, your own small harbour in the dark. Imagine the river moving far away, slow and silver under the moon. Imagine reeds bending without fear. Imagine a single lamp burning beside a tablet, while a tired scribe finally sets down his stylus. The mark is made, the line is finished. Nothing more must be pressed into clays. Let Enlil's stern sky grow distant. Let Enki's deep water become calm. Let the cities of mud brick settle into sleep, with their ovens cooling, their doors closed, and their dreams drifting softly above the canals. Let all ancient questions loosen their grip. Just for now, the future can wait until morning. The hidden conflict can rest beneath the earth, where old waters keep their secrets and old stories turn slowly in the dark. You have followed the whisper far enough. You have stood beside the flood and returned to the shore. Now the shore is quiet, and the night is kind. And perhaps, somewhere beyond memory, humanity is still being watched with wonder, with worry, and with a mercy not yet fully understood. End of script. Good night.